Hey guys, tonight we are diving headfirst into the murky, decadent, and frankly quite unhinged world of the Roman emperors. We're going to try and understand what happens when you give one person the keys to the entire known world. Spoilers, it doesn't always end well. Imagine waking up one morning and your to-do list includes decide the fate of a legion in Britannia, approve a new aqueduct, and try not to get poisoned by your lunch. It's a high-stress job, and as we'll see, the severance package was often a dagger in the dark. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love to see where you're listening from tonight. Drop your city and the time in the comments below. It's always cool to see how this little community spans the globe. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this. You're standing in the heart of Rome, but it's not the Rome of senators and public debates you might have read about. That Rome is a ghost, a memory whispered in marble halls. The air itself feels different now, heavy with the weight of a single will. The Republic, with its chaotic elections and bickering aristocrats, has bled out after a century of civil war. In its place is, well, that's the tricky part. It's not officially a kingdom. That would be a huge political faux pas. The Romans had a deep, almost allergic reaction to the word king. So instead, you have a man who holds all the power, but with a collection of much more palatable Republican-sounding titles. This is the birth of your new reality, the foundation of your new job description. You are the princeps, the first citizen. It sounds humble, doesn't it, like you're just the first among equals? But you also hold the power of a consul, giving you supreme military and civil authority. You have the power of a tribune, which means you can veto the Senate and are considered sacrosanct. Harming you is a crime against the gods. And just to round things out, you're the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome, making you the official bridge between the mortal world and the divine. You are not a king. You are a president, a commander-in-chief, a Supreme Court justice, and the Pope all rolled into one. All that power, once distributed among dozens of elected officials, now rests squarely on your shoulders. You can feel its immense gravity, a physical pressure in your chest. Every eye in the city, from the wealthiest senator to the poorest dockworker, is on you. For games, for justice, for peace, the weight is simply colossal. And here's a little detail that often gets lost in the grand narrative. Your power isn't just about these official titles. It's about something far more nebulous and far more potent. Doctorate, as there's no perfect English translation for it. It's a mix of prestige, influence, and personal authority. It's the reason that when you suggest something, it's treated as a command. It's the silent understanding that your word can build cities or shatter lives, not because of a specific law, but simply because it is your word. This is a subtle yet profound shift. The law is no longer an abstract concept, it's a reflection of your personality, your whims, your fears. When you walk through the forum, the silence that falls isn't just out of respect for your office, it's a deep-seated acknowledgement of your personal, almost supernatural, influence over the fate of every single person you pass. This entire system was the masterpiece of the first emperor Augustus. He was a political artist of the highest order. He never declared himself a monarch. Instead, he masterfully restored the republic while quietly collecting every important thread of power for himself. And this is where historians still get into lively debates over a bottle of wine. Was Augustus a visionary genius who meticulously planned this new politum itself? Did he have a blueprint from the start, carefully moving each piece on the political chessboard? Or was he more of an improviser, a survivor who simply reacted to crises, accumulating power almost accidentally because the exhausted Senate was too weak to offer an alternative? Some argue that the fall of the Republic was an inevitability, the only possible outcome for an empire that had grown too large for its old system of government. Others maintain that it was the ambition of specific men, Caesar and then Augustus, that dealt the fatal blows. The truth, as it often is probably a messy combination of both. So here you are, the first. You've inherited this strange, contradictory position. You have to project an image of effortless control, of divine calm, while beneath the surface you're paddling furiously. You're constantly watching your back, balancing the demands of the army, the pride of the Senate, and the hunger of the masses. You are the focal point of every conspiracy, every hope, every prayer in an empire of 50 million souls. The pressure is immense, the loneliness absolute. And as you lie in your palace on the Palatine Hill, listening to the sounds of the city settle for the night, you might wonder what this kind of power does to a man. What happens when the line between the person and the position begins to blur? What happens when the first citizen starts to believe he truly is a living god? The foundation has been laid. The stage is set, and the shadows are beginning to gather. The man who came before you, Augustus, wasn't just your predecessor. He was the system's architect. He reigned for over 40 years, a lifetime for most Romans. He found the city, as he famously boasted, a city of brick, and left it a city of marble. You can't escape him. You walk through the Forum, and it is his basilica, his temple, his arch that dominate the skyline. You look at the coins in your own hand, and it's his deified face on the other side. A constant reminder that your adoptive father is now officially a god, while you are just a man. The senators who bow to you in the Curia are the same men who, for decades, bowed to him. They measure your every word, your every gesture, against his memory. And he was, to put it mildly, a tough act to follow. He gave Rome the Pax Romana, the Roman peace, to centuries of relative stability and prosperity that he single-handedly initiated. He reorganized the army, reformed the tax system, established a fire brigade and a police force for the city. He was a micromanager of epic proportions, and it worked. The empire ran like a well-oiled machine under his watch. But this stability came at a cost, a personal one that everyone in the palace knew about. His personal life was a string of tragedies. He had only one child, a daughter, Julia, whom he adored but ultimately had to exile for her scandalous behavior. He groomed successor after successor only to watch them die. His handsome nephew Marcellus, dead at 19th, his brilliant general and right-hand man, Agrippa, dead. His beloved grandsons, Gaius and Lucius, the heirs he was grooming to take over, both dead before they reached their prime. The golden family he projected on public monuments was, in private, a house of sorrow and loss. Stable empire was built on a foundation of personal grief. And you, his steps on Tiberius, were the last option, the one he never really wanted. The pressure to live up to the image of the flawless founder, while knowing the rotten truth of the family's core, begins to gnaw at you. And here's a funny little detail about the great Augustus, the man who was posthumously declared a god. In his personal life, he lived more like a frugal accountant than an emperor. While later emperors would build sprawling gold-plated palaces, Augustus lived in a surprisingly modest house on the Palatine Hill. He slept in a small bedroom on a low bed. His clothes weren't imported silks from the East, they were simple, homespun wool tunics and tugas, often woven by his own wife Livia, and the women of his household, just like in the old Republican days. He was a picky eater, preferring simple fare like coarse bread, small fish, and green figs. He wasn't a showman. In fact, he was famously terrified of lightning, and during thunderstorms, he would hide in a sealed, underground room. This is the man you have to follow, a military and political genius who created an empire but personally lived with an austerity that borders on stingy. It sets a bizarre precedent. Are you supposed to mimic his simple lifestyle, or embrace the luxury that your absolute power now affords? This leads us to one of the most persistent and deliciously dark debates among Roman historians. The succession. How did Augustus, the master planner, end up with you, the gloomy and resentful Tiberius, as his heir? Was it just a case of spectacularly bad luck? A series of tragic, premature deaths that left him with no other choice, or was something more sinister at play? The historian Tacitus, our primary source for much of this drama, strongly implies that your mother, Augustus's wife Livia, was the real power behind the throne. He paints a portrait of a brilliant, ruthless woman who may have had a hand in clearing the path for her own son. Did she poison Marcellus? Was she involved in the convenient deaths of Gaius and Lucius? The historical evidence is purely circumstantial, based on rumor and innuendo. There is no smoking gun, no definitive proof. arguing that a series of illnesses and accidents in an age of high mortality is perfectly plausible. But the suspicion lingers. The idea that the serene, stable Augustan age was underpinned by a quiet, systematic campaign of palace poisoning is just too tantalizing to dismiss entirely. And so, you sit on the throne. You are the sole survivor of this brutal family drama. You weren't the first choice, or the second, or even the third. You are the emperor by default. Every time you look at your mother, Livia, you might wonder what she did to get you here. Every time a senator compares you unfavorably to the divine Augustus, you feel a flash of resentment. He built this world, but you are the one who has to live in it. With its endless demands and its whispering corridors, starts to feel less like a prize and more like a prison. You inherited the power, but you also inherited the ghosts, and you begin to dream of escape, a place far away from the marble glare of Augustus' legacy, a place where you can finally be yourself, for better or for worse. The city is suffocating. The endless senatorial meetings where you have to pretend to care about their opinions, the constant stream of petitioners begging for favors, the weight of your mother Livia's watchful eyes, it's all becoming too much. You are the most powerful man in the world, and yet you feel utterly trapped. You start looking at maps. You crave solitude, a release from the relentless performance of being emperor. And then you find it, a small, rugged island off the coast of Campania, Capri. It's perfect. It's close enough to the mainland that you can still receive dispatches and maintain the illusion of being in charge, but it's separated by a treacherous stretch of water, making it a natural fortress. High cliffs plunge into the sea, offering breathtaking views and, more importantly, security. There are only a couple of landing spots, easily guarded. On this island, no one can approach you unannounced. So you leave. You announce to the Roman people that you are old, you are tired, and you need rest. You pack up the imperial court and sail to Capri. You build 12 villas on the island, each named after one of the gods. Your main residence, the Villa Jovis, or Villa of Jupiter, is perched on a cliff top, a sprawling complex of private apartments, baths, and reception halls with a sheer 1,000-foot drop to the sea below. This becomes your sanctuary and your new seat of power. The day-to-day administration of the empire is now left in the hands of your ambitious praetorian prefect, Sejanus, back in Rome. You communicate through messengers. For the last decade of your reign, you rule the entire Roman Empire from a remote island paradise. You have achieved what no one thought possible. You've become an absentee emperor. You have all the power, with none of the tedious public-facing responsibilities. Now, what exactly did you do on this island if you believe the Roman historian Suetonius? Your retirement was eventful. He paints a picture of Capri not as a place of peaceful contemplation, but as a private den of depravity, a place where you could finally unleash all the dark desires you had suppressed for decades. He describes secret grottos used for lavish swimming parties, surrounded by exquisite art. He tells stories of you indulging in perverse pleasures, shielded from the judgment of the Roman public. According to him, the beautiful cliffs of Capri had a dark purpose. Anyone who displeased you, a servant who dropped a plate, a visitor who said the wrong thing, was simply thrown from the rocks. The Emperor's Leap, as it came to be known, was your method of execution. You even had a crew of sailors stationed in the water below, ready to beat any survivors to death with oars, just to be sure. It's a terrifying image, absolute power combined with absolute isolation. But here's a peculiar little fact that complicates this picture of a monster. While you were supposedly lost in hedonistic pursuits on Capri, you were also one of the most financially prudent emperors Rome ever had. You abhorred excessive spending. When you died, you left the imperial treasury with a massive surplus, a fortune that would be squandered by your successor Caligula. You were notoriously stingy with public gains and grand building projects, which made you unpopular with the Roman mob. You once famously told your provincial governors who were trying to overtax their populations that a good shepherd shears his flock. He doesn't flay it alive. So you have this bizarre contradiction, a man accused of the most extreme personal debauchery who was, at the same time, an incredibly cautious and responsible financial manager of the state. This, of course, brings us to the great historical debate about your reign. Was Capri really the den of horrors that Suetonius describes, or was this an elaborate smear campaign to Tacitus? Another major source is more reserved. He focuses on your paranoia and cruelty, particularly the treason trials you unleashed from your island retreat, but he is less graphic about your personal life. Many modern historians are deeply skeptical of Suetonius' account. They argue that he was writing decades after you died, and his main goal was to entertain his audience with scandalous gossip, not to present a factual biography. The stories are just too wild, too perfectly villainous. The idea of an absentee emperor was deeply offensive to traditional Roman values. An emperor was supposed to be in Rome, visible to his people. By abandoning the city, you opened yourself up to the worst kinds of rumors. It's entirely possible that you were simply an old, tired, and deeply misanthropic man who wanted to be left alone, and the Roman gossip machine filled in the blanks with the most imaginable. Was it an island of perversion or just the Roman equivalent of a quiet retirement home for a grumpy old man who happened to rule the world? The archaeological evidence from the villas on Capri is inconclusive. We have the ruins, but they don't whisper secrets of what truly happened within their walls. And so you live out your days on this island fortress, a remote puppet master pulling the strings of an empire. Messages arrive, you send back your orders. Accusations of treason fly, and from your sun-drenched villa, you condemn men in Rome to death. You have escaped the city, but you haven't escaped the darkness. In fact, by isolating yourself, you've allowed it to grow, unchecked by public opinion or senatorial oversight. You've created a template for future emperors, the idea that you can retreat from the duties of the office while still clinging to its power. It's a dangerous precedent, and it sets the stage for a successor who will take that idea of unaccountable, private indulgence to a whole new level. Back in Rome, the city holds its breath. You, the Emperor Tiberius, are old and secluded on your island. The question on everyone's lips is who's next. All eyes turn to one young man, the last surviving son of Germanicus. His name is Gaius, but everyone knows him by his childhood nickname Caligula. And to understand Caligula, you first have to understand the immense shadow cast by his father. Germanicus was everything a Roman hero was supposed to be. He was handsome, charismatic, a brilliant general, and immensely popular with both the people and the legions. He was the adopted son of Tiberius, and for years he was the designated heir, the shining future of Rome. You remember seeing the crowds cheer for him, their adoration palpable. He was the son Augustus should have had. As a young general, Germanicus was sent to the Rhine frontier to command the legions. He led them on daring campaigns deep into Germania, avenging the humiliating defeat at the Teutoburg forest years earlier. He recovered the lost legionary eagles, a massive boost to Roman morale. The soldiers adored him. He was one of them, sharing their hardships, fighting alongside them. His wife, Agrippina the Elder, a granddaughter of Augustus, often traveled with him, bringing their young children. It was here that your future emperor, a little boy at the time, got his famous nickname. The soldiers were charmed to see him toddling around the camp, wearing a miniature soldier's uniform, complete with tiny military boots. Or colleague Guy, they affectionately called him Caligula, meaning little boot. A cute name for a child, but a ridiculous one for an emperor. It was a name that would follow him for the rest of his life, the constant reminder of a popularity he hadn't earned himself. Then disaster struck. Germanicus was recalled from the German frontier. Tiberius was perhaps growing jealous of his popularity, sent on a diplomatic tour of the eastern provinces. While in Antioch, he fell gravely ill and died. He was only 33rd on his deathbed. Germanicus was convinced he had been poisoned. He accused the governor of Syria, Gnaeus Calpurnius Piso, a close ally of Tiberius, of carrying out the assassination on the emperor's orders. He made his friends swear an oath to avenge him. The news of his death sparked a wave of public grief across the empire unlike any seen before. When his wife Agrippina returned to Italy with his ashes, crowds lined the entire route from the port to Rome, mourning silently. The hero was gone, and suspicion immediately fell upon you, the Emperor Tiberius. Did you orchestrate the death of your own adopted son and heir out of jealousy? This is where the historical narrative gets murky, and the whispers start. Piso was put on trial in Rome. He maintained his innocence, threatening to release documents that would incriminate Tiberius himself. But before the trial could conclude, Piso was found dead in his home, supposedly by his own hand. The official verdict was suicide, but few believed it. Was he encouraged to kill himself to prevent him from talking? The question of Tiberius's guilt has been debated by historians for 2 millennia. There is no concrete evidence linking you directly to Germanicus's death. It's entirely possible he died of an illness, and the poisoning charge was a product of paranoia and political maneuvering by his wife Agrippina. She was an ambitious woman who saw you as an obstacle to her own son's path to power. Blaming you for her husband's death was a powerful political weapon. We will likely never know the full truth. The case of Germanicus's death remains one of Roman history's great unsolved mysteries. So you, young Caligula, grow up in this toxic environment. Your beloved father is dead, and everyone whispers that the emperor murdered him. Your mother, Agrippina, becomes Tiberius's bitter enemy. She openly defies him, and he retaliates. She and your 2 older brothers are arrested for treason. Your mother is exiled to a barren island where she starves to death. Your eldest brother is imprisoned and also dies of starvation. Your other brother is forced into suicide. You, little boo, are the only one who survives. Why? Because you were young enough to be considered harmless. You are summoned to live with the aging Emperor Tiberius on Capri. Imagine the psychological torment. You spend your teenage years living with the man you believe murdered your entire family. You have to smile, obey, and show absolute deference, knowing that one wrong word could mean a quick trip off the emperor's leap. Suetonius claims that you were a natural actor, perfectly concealing your resentment behind a mask of servility. He famously quotes Tiberius as saying, "I am nursing a viper in Rome's bosom." This is the young man waiting in the wings, an orphan whose entire family was systematically destroyed by the state. A boy who grew up in an atmosphere of absolute terror and suspicion, forced to flatter the man he hated most. He has seen firsthand that power is a zero-sum game, a brutal struggle for survival. He has learned that sentiment and family ties mean nothing in the face of ambition. As Tiberius finally breathes his last, some even whisper that Caligula's ally, the new Praetorian prefect Macro, smothered him with a pillow to speed things along. The path is clear. You, Caligula, are about to inherit the world, and the world has no idea what's coming. The viper is no longer in the bosom, he's about to be placed on the throne. The news of Tiberius' death reaches Rome, and the city erupts not in mourning, but in celebration. Mobs run through the streets chanting, "Tiberius to the Tiber," the traditional cry for the corpse of a tyrant to be thrown into the river. The suffocating gloom of the old emperor's reign is finally over. And into this joyous vacuum steps you. You are no longer Gaius, the forgotten orphan from Capri. You are now Gaius Julius Caesar Germanicus, inheriting the most powerful name in Roman history. But everyone still calls you Caligula, little boot. And for now, it's a term of endearment. You are the son of the beloved Germanicus, and the people project all their love for your father onto you. Your arrival in Rome is a triumph. The Senate, relieved to be rid of the paranoid Tiberius, eagerly bestows upon you all the imperial powers. You are imperial powers. You are young, handsome, and the sole survivor of a tragic, heroic family. The first few months of your reign are a dream. It's as if the sun has come out after a long, dark winter. You start by paying out the generous bequests left in Tiberius's will, and then you add a hefty bonus from your own pocket. The soldiers are happy. The people are happy. You hold all the treason trials that had cast such a pall over Rome. You recall the exiles. You burn the records of your mother's and brother's trials in a grand public gesture in the Forum, declaring an end to the era of fear. You stage lavish gladiatorial games and chariot races, things Tiberius had disdained. You are the anti-Tiberius in every way, and Rome loves you for it. You project an image of clemency, generosity, and youthful energy. Senators breathe a sigh of relief. The common people cheer your name in the streets. It seems like a new golden age has dawned. But there are early signs, little cracks in the perfect facade, that hint at a different personality lurking beneath. You have a strange, almost morbid, sense of humor. You enjoy watching tortures and executions, sometimes scheduling them during the lunch break at the games for the entertainment of those who hadn't gone home to eat. You have a deep passion for the stage, for acting, singing and dancing, which was considered deeply undignified for a man of your class, let alone an emperor. You also develop an intense, and to Roman eyes, deeply unsettling relationship with your sisters, especially Drusilla. You treat her not as a sibling, but almost as a wife, appearing with her at public functions in a way that raised many eyebrows. It was a violation of Roman custom, and whispers of incest, a practice associated with the decadent pharaohs of Egypt, began to circulate. Then, just 7 months into your reign, you fall desperately. Illness is unknown. It could have been encephalitis, or perhaps a nervous breakdown. The entire empire holds its breath. Prayers and sacrifices are offered for your recovery. One man even pledges his own life to the gods if only you will be spared. The outpouring of public concern is immense, and then you recover. But the man who emerges from the sickbed is different. The cheerful, benevolent ruler is gone. In his place is someone erratic, arrogant, and cruel. It is this sudden change that has led many, both ancient and modern, to speculate that the illness caused some form of brain damage, tipping you from a merely eccentric young man into a full-blown megalomaniac. The historian Suetonius marks this as the moment the monster was truly born. The reign takes a sharp, dark turn. You force the man who had pledged his life for your recovery to fulfill his vow, making him commit suicide because, you argued, you had kept your side of the bargain by getting better. You begin to insist on being treated not as a princeps or first citizen, but as a living god. This was a step too far even for the Romans. They were comfortable defying dead emperors, but worshipping a living one was an Eastern, despotic tradition that ran contrary to all their values. You build a temple to yourself in the Forum, complete with a life-sized golden statue that was dressed each day in a replica of the clothes you were wearing. You would appear in public dressed as various gods: Hercules, Jupiter, Neptune, and demand that people worship you. Senators who had once praised you were now forced to prostrate themselves and kiss your feet. The playful eccentric has become a terrifying tyrant. Here's a small but telling detail about your new divine status. You began a conversation with the gods. You would often be seen muttering to a statue of Jupiter, sometimes arguing with it, sometimes whispering secrets. You even had a private bridge built connecting your palace on the Palatine Hill directly to the Temple of Jupiter on the Capitoline Hill, so that you could visit your fellow god for a chat without having to descend among the mortals. Historians still debate the meaning of this behavior. Were you a cynical manipulator, using the divinity angle as a tool to consolidate absolute power and terrify the Senate into submission? Or did your illness convince you that you had actually become divine? Were you a calculating tyrant, or a man genuinely suffering from a profound delusion? The line between political theater and actual insanity becomes impossibly blurred. The little boot who rode into Rome on a wave of popular adoration has now become a self-proclaimed god who demands worship and punishes any perceived slight with death. The city that had celebrated your arrival is now wrapped in your bizarre, terrifying reality show. Your transformation into a living god isn't just a matter of personal belief, it becomes a public performance, and the stage is often the imperial dining room. The lavish Roman banquet or scene has always been a place for political theater, a way to display wealth and status. But you take it to a whole new level of bizarre. You don't just host dinners, you curate surreal, terrifying experiences for your guests, who are mostly senators and wealthy equestrians you despise. They receive your invitation, and they cannot refuse. To decline a dinner with the emperor would be a fatal insult. So they arrive at your palace, filled with dread, wondering what new madness awaits them. Imagine being one of these senators. You arrive at the palace and the opulence is staggering. The dining room might be filled with exotic flowers, the air thick with expensive perfumes. But the atmosphere is tense. You, Caligula, are reclining on the most prominent couch, perhaps dressed as Jupiter, with an eagle-topped scepter in your hand. The food itself is a spectacle of absurdity. Dishes are designed to trick the eye. What looks like a roasted pig might be filled with live birds that fly out when it's carved. Loaves of bread might be made of solid gold, completely inedible, a taunt to your guests about your immense wealth. You might serve food dyed black and hold the banquet in a black draped room, announcing that it is a funeral feast for your still living guests. They have to eat, and pretend to enjoy it, all while trembling with fear. The psychological games are relentless. You might suddenly burst into loud, maniacal laughter for no reason. When your nervous guests ask what's so funny, you casually reply, "I was just thinking that with a single nod of my head, I could have all of your throats cut." The dinner continues in stony silence, or you might walk around the couches, examining the wives of your guests. You would select one, take her to a private room, and then return to the banquet, where you would loudly announce a detailed and oft uncritical review of her performance to her horrified husband. You are not just an emperor, you are a master of psychological torment, using these dinners to humiliate and terrorize the Roman elite, reminding them of their utter powerlessness. Here's a particularly strange little detail about your dinner parties, a testament to your twisted sense of humor. You had a favorite horse, Incitatus, and we'll get to his political career later. But you loved this horse so much that you would sometimes invite him to dinner. Not just to the stable, but to the actual banquet. The horse would be led into the dining room, where a special place would be set for him. Servants would offer him oats mixed with gold flakes in a marble manger. You would propose toasts to the horse's health, and your human guests would have to dutifully raise their cups and drink to Incitatus. It was the ultimate act of humiliation for the proud Roman senators being forced to share their dinner table with an animal, and to treat that animal with the respect due to a fellow aristocrat. The historical debate here is a fascinating one. Were these acts the golden bread, the death threats, the horse at the dinner table purely the product of a deranged mind? Was this insanity, plain and simple, or was there a twisted logic to it all? Some historians argue that this was a calculated, albeit extreme, form of political strategy. You came to power young, with no real allies in the Senate. The old powerful senators looked down on you, the little boot, by subjecting them to these unpredictable, terrifying rituals. You were systematically breaking down their pride and their sense of security. You were demonstrating, in the most visceral way possible, that the old rules of aristocratic honor and republican dignity were dead. There was only one rule now: your will. The dinners were a brutal form of shock therapy for the Roman ruling class, teaching them that you were not a princeps to be advised, but a god to be feared and obeyed without question. It was a terrifyingly effective way to consolidate power, even if it was rooted in what looks to us like madness. So night after night, the elite of Rome are forced to attend these ghastly performances. They eat your food, laugh at your cruel jokes, and praise your divine wisdom, all while a knot of terror tightens in their stomachs. The palace, once the center of imperial administration, has become a theater of the absurd, a place where the line between divinity and madness, between a banquet and an execution, has completely disappeared. You are no longer just ruling the empire, you are directing a horror movie, and the most powerful men in Rome are your unwilling cast. Your divine authority and your contempt for the stuffy, tradition-bound senate are on a collision course. You've humiliated them at dinner parties, forced them to worship you, and treated their ancient institution as your personal plaything. But you feel the need for a grander gesture, an act so absurd, so utterly contemptuous, that it will forever cement your power over them and expose their utter irrelevance. And you find the perfect vehicle for this statement: your beloved horse, Incitatus. Incitatus, whose name means swift or at full gallop, is no ordinary horse. He is a magnificent Spanish stallion, your pride and joy. He lives a life of luxury that most Romans could only dream of. He has a stable made of marble with an ivory manger. He's fed a diet of oats mixed with gold flakes. He has a staff of servants dedicated to his every need. He even has a collection of purple blankets, the color reserved for emperors, and a collar of precious jewels. On the eve of his races, he would post soldiers in the neighborhood to enforce silence, so his precious sleep wouldn't be disturbed. Your devotion to this animal is absolute. To you, he represents purity and nobility, qualities you find utterly lacking in the senators of Rome. The idea begins to form in your mind, perhaps during one of those surreal banquets. Why not if you are a god? And the Senate is filled with sycophants and fools. Why shouldn't your noble horse be as qualified to hold office as any of them? You start by making Incitatus a priest in a cult dedicated to your own divinity. The senators have to watch as a horse is inducted into a prestigious religious office. But that's just the warm-up act. You then announce your intention to elevate Incitatus to the highest political office in the Roman state. You are going to make him a consul. Let's be clear about what this means. The consulship was the pinnacle of a Roman political career. It was the office held by men like Cicero, Pompey the Great, and Julius Caesar himself. It was the ultimate symbol of republican authority and prestige. By proposing to give this honor to a horse, you are not just being eccentric, you are committing the ultimate act of political vandalism. You are screaming to the world that the most revered office in Rome is meaningless. An animal that can't speak or reason is more worthy of this honor than any of the backstabbing, two-faced aristocrats who populate the Senate. It is a joke of such epic, world historical proportions that the senators are left speechless. They can't just to defy a god, and that means death. They can only sit there in horrified silence as you outline your plans for Consul Incitatus's term in office. Now, here's a little fact that gets lost in the sheer craziness of the story. You never actually went through with it. Incitatus was never formally appointed consul. You were assassinated before you could make it happen. This has led to the big historical question: were you serious? Was this a genuine plan born of a mind that had completely lost touch with reality? Did you actually believe your horse should be consul? Or was this the most brilliant, albeit terrifying, piece of political satire ever conceived? The academic debate is split. One camp argues that this is clear evidence of your insanity. You had become so detached from the world, so wrapped up in your own divinity, that appointing your horse to high office seemed like a perfectly reasonable thing to do. The other camp, however, sees a shrewder, more cynical motive. They argue that you were not insane, but were instead a master of political theater. The threat of making Incitatus consul was a calculated move to humiliate the Senate into total submission. It was a way of saying, "You are all so worthless and servile that I might as well replace you with my horse. He would do just as good a job, and he'd certainly be more loyal." By dangling this ultimate insult over their heads, you kept them perpetually off balance and terrified. The story was likely exaggerated by later historians like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, who wanted to paint you as the ultimate mad tyrant. But the core of it, your open contempt for the Senate and your extravagant love for your horse, was very real. So the specter of Consul Incitatus haunts the Senate House. The most powerful men in Rome live with the knowledge the emperor values his horse more than all of them combined. They are forced to contemplate a future where they will have to consult with an equine colleague, take orders from a stallion. It's the logical endpoint of your reign of absurdity. You've turned the Roman state into a joke, and you are the only one who is allowed to laugh. The story of the horse consul becomes the ultimate symbol of your rule, a perfect encapsulation of how absolute power, when placed in the hands of a traumatized, deeply unstable young man, can lead not just to cruelty, but to a profound and terrifying silliness that threatens to unravel the fabric of an entire empire. Having thoroughly terrorized the political establishment in Rome, you decide it's time to remind the military who's in charge. Your father, Germanicus, was a true soldier's general, beloved by the legions. You, on the other hand, have no military experience. Your only connection to the army is your childhood nickname, Little Boot. You need a glorious victory to cement your authority, to prove that you are not just a theatrical god, but also a mighty conqueror in the tradition of Augustus and Caesar. So you announce a grand military campaign. To target the unconnected lands of Germania and the troublesome island of Britannia. It's a bold plan, designed to evoke the memory of your heroic father and the great Julius Caesar. You march north from Rome with the Praetorian Guard and several legions, a massive military force. The journey itself is a spectacle. It's less of a military campaign and more of a traveling circus. You travel in an enormous procession with a troupe of actors, dancers, and gladiators in your retinue. Your baggage train includes not just military supplies, but also elaborate props and costumes for your theatrical performances. You stage mock battles and surprise attacks on your own troops, causing chaos and confusion. At one point, you order a contingent of your German bodyguard to hide in a forest and then discover them as enemy spies, just so you can play the part of the vigilant commander. The soldiers, professional fighting men, are baffled by their new commander-in-chief, who seems to think war is a form of performance art. You reach the northern coast in what is now modern-day France, poised to launch the invasion of Britain. The legions are assembled on the shore, the transport ships are ready. The soldiers stand in formation, looking out across the grey, choppy waters of the English Channel, ready for a fight. They expect the order to embark, to go and win glory for Rome and their emperor. And then you give the command. But it's not the one anyone expects. You order the soldiers to prepare for battle. You have them line up along the beach in full armor, with their swords drawn and their javelins ready. The trumpets sound the charge, and then you point to their enemy. It's the sea. You declare war on Neptune, the god of the sea. You order your legions to attack the waves. The baffled soldiers have no choice but to obey. Thousands of legionaries run into the surf, stabbing at the water with their swords, flinging their javelins into the waves. It is a scene of supreme, state-sponsored absurdity. The finest army in the world is engaged in a full-scale battle with the ocean. And then comes the order for the second phase of the operation. You declare that the soldiers must now gather the spoils of their victory. You order them to take off their helmets and fill them with seashells from the beach. These shells, you announce, are the plunder of the ocean, a tribute to be taken back to Rome and displayed in your triumph. The soldiers, weary and bewildered, spend hours combing the beach for seashells to present to their divine emperor. A quirky and often overlooked detail of this episode is the logistical effort involved. You didn't just tell them to pick up shells, you commanded them to build a lighthouse at Bologna to commemorate this victory over the ocean. The ruins of a Roman lighthouse, known as the Tour d'Order, stood on that spot for centuries, and many believe it was the one you ordered built. So this moment of apparent madness was actually immortalized in stone, a permanent monument to one of history's most bizarre military commands. As you can imagine, historians have had a field day with this one. What on earth was going on? The traditional explanation, favored by Suetonius, is that this was the ultimate proof of your insanity. You were so delusional that you literally thought you could fight and defeat a god, and that seashells were a legitimate war booty. It's the story of a man who had completely lost his mind. However, in recent years a more nuanced interpretation has emerged, and this is where the academic debate really heats up. Some scholars suggest this wasn't madness but a bizarre form of punishment. The legions on the Rhine had been involved in a minor conspiracy against you shortly before the campaign. The whole battle against the sea might have been your way of deliberately unsystematically humiliating them for their disloyalty. By forcing these proud soldiers to perform such a ridiculous task, you were showing them that their martial pride meant nothing, and their lives were subject to your every whim, no matter how nonsensical. Another theory, and this one is quite clever, suggests linguistic misunderstanding. The Latin word for shells, musculi, was also a slang term for the small huts used by engineers, the sappers' huts. Some historians have proposed that you never ordered the soldiers to collect seashells at all. You may have ordered them to collect musculi, meaning to dismantle the army's engineering huts in preparation for a cancelled invasion. The story could have been a joke that got out of hand, later twisted by hostile historians into a tale of madness. We will never know for sure. Was it a psychotic break, a calculated act of humiliation, or a colossal misunderstanding? The image remains the Roman legions, conquerors of the known world, standing ankle-deep in the English Channel, dutifully collecting seashells for their emperor. Your grand invasion of Britannia has ended not with a bang, but with the gentle clinking of shells in a legionary's helmet. You return to Rome from your triumphant war against the sea, planning a grand celebration to honor your victory. But the city you return to is not the adoring one you left. The atmosphere has curdled. The senators, whom you've systematically humiliated, live in constant fear. The military leadership, baffled by your antics in the north, is growing resentful. The Praetorian Guard, your own personal bodyguards, have been witness to your most unhinged moments. The loyalty that once surrounded you has been eroded by your cruelty and unpredictability. You have made enemies of every powerful faction in the state. The viper that Tiberius nurtured is now seen as a rabid dog, and people are starting to realize there's only one way to deal with a rabid dog. A conspiracy begins to form, centered in the heart of your own security detail. The leader is Cassius Chaerea, a tribune of the Praetorian Guard. Chaerea is an old-school soldier, a veteran who has served for decades with honor. He is not a man driven by ambition, but by a deep sense of offended dignity. You, Caligula, have taken a special delight in tormenting him. Caligula has a high-pitched, reedy voice, and you endlessly mock him for it, calling him effeminate. You give him lewd and insulting passwords for the day, like Priapus or Venus, further humiliating him in front of his men. For you, it's a casual joke. For Caligula, it is a constant, public chipping away at his honor. His dignity is the most important quality a Roman man could possess. This personal vendetta, this relentless bullying, proves to be your fatal mistake. You have pushed an honorable man to fall. The plot grows to include other praetorian officers, as well as several influential senators who provide the political backing. The plan is to strike during the Palatine Games, a festival you yourself instituted. The date is set for January 24, 41 AD. The conspirators are nervous. They know that if they fail, the retribution will be horrific. They almost lose their nerves several times, but Caligula's resolve holds them together. His personal honor is at stake. The day arrives. You spend the morning at the theater, enjoying the performances. You are in a good mood. Around noon, you decide to leave the theater to go to your private baths for lunch and a rest. This is the moment the conspirators have been waiting for. They need to isolate you from your loyal German bodyguard, a formidable group of soldiers who would die for you. As you walk through a secluded underground corridor or crypto porticus that connects the theater to palace, the conspirators surround you. A group of young boys, actors from Greece, are in the corridor, and you stop to speak with them, delaying your progress. Caligula becomes impatient. He approaches you from behind. He asks for the password for the day. You, with your typical smirk, give him another insulting, effeminate one. That is the final straw. Caligula bellows, "Take this," and strikes the first blow, his sword slashing across your neck and shoulder. You are wounded but not killed. You cry out in pain and try to run, but now the other conspirators close in. Another officer, Cornelius Sabinus, stabs you in the chest, bringing you to the ground. The corridor erupts into a frenzy of violence. The conspirators, fueled by years of pent-up fear and hatred, descend upon your fallen body. They stab you again and again, long after you are dead. Ancient sources claim you were stabbed over 30 times. They want to make sure the monster is truly dead. The assassins don't stop with you. Your wife Milo and Iacie Sonia is murdered. And in the most chilling act of the coup, your infant daughter, Julia Drusilla, is also killed. A soldier grabs the baby by the feet and swings her head against a wall, bashing out her brains. The assassins are determined to extinguish your entire line to ensure no heir can come back to seek revenge. This is a point of grim fascination for historians. Why the extreme brutality, the repeated stabbing, the murder of your wife and child? This wasn't just a political assassination, it was an act of personal rage and exorcism. The conspirators weren't just killing an emperor, they were trying to obliterate a curse. Historians still debate the level of senatorial involvement. Were the senators active participants in the plot, or did they simply give their tacit approval, waiting to see which way the wind would blow? Tacitus suggests the plot was wider than just a few praetorian officers, and that many in the Senate were aware of it and waiting for the moment to restore the Republic. The historical record is biased, written by men of the senatorial class, who had every reason to distance themselves from the regicide while also claiming credit for liberating the state. The immediate aftermath is chaos. Your loyal German bodyguard, hearing the commotion, finally arrives, but it's too late. Enraged, they go on a killing spree, cutting down anyone they find in the palace, including some of the innocent and some of the guilty. Rome is without an emperor. The Senate, for a brief, heady moment, begins to debate restoring the Republic. They talk of liberty, of bringing back the old ways, but they have forgotten one crucial thing. They might have despised the emperor, but the army, and especially the Praetorian Guard, had benefited immensely from the system. They were not about to give up their power and privileged position. While the senators are busy looking for a new emperor, and they are about to find one in the most unlikely of places, the reign of Little Boot is over, ending in a bloody corridor, but the age of emperors is far from finished. The palace is a maelstrom of confusion and terror. You, Caligula, bloody heap in the corridor. Your German bodyguards are rampaging through the halls, killing anyone they suspect of being part of the conspiracy. Senators are either locked in the Curia debating the future of Rome or hiding in their homes, fearing for their lives. The city is a powder keg. In this moment of pure chaos, the fate of the Roman Empire is about to be decided not by a grand debate or a noble ideal, but by a single, terrified soldier in a piece of drapery. Let's shift our perspective for a moment. You are no longer the emperor. You are now Claudius. You are Caligula's uncle, the brother of the great Germanicus. And you are, to put it kindly, considered the family joke. You spent your entire life being overlooked, ridiculed, and underestimated. You have a persistent limp from a childhood illness. You stutter and drool slightly when you get excited. Your own mother, Antonia, called you a monstrosity of a man, not finished but merely begun by nature. The imperial family has always been deeply embarrassed by you, keeping you out of the public eye. While your nephew Caligula was terrorizing Rome, you survived mostly by playing up your supposed incompetence. You let him mock you, you acted the fool, and in doing so, you made yourself appear harmless. And in Caligula's court, being harmless was the key to survival. When you hear the commotion of the assassination, you do what you've done your whole life: you hide. You are convinced that the assassins are killing off the entire imperial family, and that you are next. You run through the palace looking for a place to conceal yourself. You find a private apartment and duck behind a heavy curtain, pulling the fabric around you, trying to make yourself as small as possible. You stand there, trembling in the dark, listening to the shouts and the sounds of running feet, praying that no one finds you. This is when a soldier from the Praetorian Guard, a man named Gratus, comes clattering into the room. He and his fellow guards are looting the palace, taking advantage of the chaos. He sees the curtain, notices a pair of feet poking out from the bottom, and pulls it aside, expecting to find a wealthy courtier to rob. Instead, he finds you, Claudius, the emperor's uncle, cowering in fear. You see the soldier and immediately fall to your knees, begging for your life. But Gratus doesn't draw his sword. A thought, an incredibly audacious thought, flashes through his mind. The Senate is dithering. The city needs a leader. And here at his feet is a member of the imperial family. He doesn't see a stuttering fool. He sees an opportunity. In a moment that changed Roman history, the soldier Gratus kneels down and hails you as the new emperor. You are utterly bewildered. This has to be a joke. Other soldiers arrive, drawn by the noise. They see Gratus hailing you, and they join in. It dawns on them, if they install their own emperor, they will be rewarded handsomely. They can secure their power and influence. So they hoist you, a terrified and protesting 50-year-old man, onto their shoulders. They carry you out of the palace and march. They carry you out of the Praetorian camp, the heavily fortified barracks just outside the city. For all intents and purposes, their prisoner and their chosen candidate. You spend the night in the camp, surrounded by thousands of armed soldiers, while the Senate continues to debate the restoration of the Republic, completely oblivious to the fact that the game has already changed. Here's a small, telling detail about this moment. According to the historian Suetonius, as you were being carried on the soldiers' shoulders through the streets, the common people who saw you didn't jeer or protest. They looked on with pity, thinking that you were an innocent man being carried off to your execution. No one, absolutely no one, believed you could actually become emperor. Your reputation as a harmless eccentric was that complete. The next morning, the reality of the situation becomes clear. The Praetorian Guard has made their choice. They send a message to the Senate. The senators can either accept you, Claudius, as the new emperor, or they can face the Praetorian Guard in open battle. It's an ultimatum. The senators, who have no army of their own, are trapped. Their lofty dream of restoring the Republic has evaporated overnight. They had the motive and the opportunity, but the Praetorians had the sword. Reluctantly, resentfully, the Senate caves. They formally grant you all the imperial titles and powers. And so you, Claudius, the man who started the day hiding behind a curtain, ended as the master of the Roman world. This event marks a crucial and rather sordid turning point in Roman history, a point that historians love to dissect. It is the first time that the Praetorian Guard has explicitly and violently intervened to create an emperor. They did not discover you by accident, they chose you. Power no longer flowed from the Senate, or from the will of the people, or even from a designated bloodline. It now flowed from the Praetorian camp. You became emperor not because of merit or destiny, but because you were the only viable candidate in the right place at the right time, found by a soldier who saw a chance to secure a bonus for himself and his comrades. You owe your throne entirely to the military. This creates a dangerous precedent that will hold the empire for centuries to come, the understanding that the Guard can both make and unmake emperors. The man behind the curtain has been thrust onto the stage, but the men with the swords are now the directors. So here you are, Emperor Claudius, the idiot, the fool, the man who was literally found trembling behind a curtain. The entire Roman elite, from the senators to the palace courtiers, expects a disaster. They snicker behind their hands at your limp and your stutter. They see you as a puppet of the Praetorian Guard, a weakened, ineffectual placeholder who will be easily manipulated. No one thinks you will last, but you are about to prove everyone wrong. The fool on the throne turns out to be far more capable than anyone ever imagined. Your first act as emperor is a masterstroke of political calculation. You need to deal with the assassins of your nephew Caligula. The Senate wants to proclaim them heroes and liberators. The Praetorian Guard, who were Caligula's bodyguards, want them all executed for murder. You are caught in the middle. You thread the needle perfectly. You order the execution of Cassius Cherry and a few of the main conspirators. This satisfies the honor of the Praetorian Guard and establishes the principle that killing an emperor is unacceptable. However, you grant a general amnesty to everyone else involved, including all the senators. This is a signal of clemency, a way of saying you want to move on and not start your reign with a bloody purge like Caligula did. It's a shrewd move that pacifies both sides and allows you to start with a relatively clean slate. With the immediate crisis handled, you get down to the business of actually governing. And it turns out you're surprisingly good at it. While your family kept you out of politics, you had spent your lonely years studying. You are a genuine scholar, a historian who has written books on Etruscan and Carthaginian history. You approach the administration of the empire not as a god or a showman, but as a diligent, if slightly eccentric, academic. You preside personally over judicial cases, often for hours on end, showing a deep interest in the law. You are surprisingly accessible, allowing common citizens to approach you with petitions. You launch major public works projects that Rome desperately needed, including two new aqueducts, the Aqua Claudia and the Anio Novus, which significantly improved the city's water supply. You also build a new, state-of-the-art port at Ostia, at the mouth of the Tiber, to solve the persistent problem of grain shortages in the capital. These are not glamorous, self-aggrandizing projects. They are practical, necessary, and incredibly effective. And then you do something that no one expected from the physically frail, scholarly emperor. You decide to succeed where even the great Julius Caesar had failed. You launch a full-scale invasion of Britannia. In 43 AD, you dispatch for legions across the Channel. Unlike Caligula's war against the sea, this is a real, meticulously planned military operation. And it is a stunning success. The Roman legions establish a permanent foothold on the island, and the southern part of Britain becomes a new Roman province. You even travel to Britain yourself for a short time to be present for the final victory, celebrating a grand triumph in Rome upon your return. You, the man everyone mocked, have achieved a military conquest that had eluded your predecessors for a century. You have proven yourself to be a true Roman emperor, a conqueror who expanded the empire. Now for a wonderfully nerdy and odd little fact about your reign as a scholar and a historian. You were deeply interested in the Latin language. You actually tried to add 3 new letters to the Latin alphabet. They are now known as the Claudian letters. One was for the sound of V, as distinct from U, another for the P's, sound like the Greek letter psi, and a third for the Y sound. You gave a speech in the Senate arguing for their necessity, and for a while, during your reign. These letters were officially used in public inscriptions. You can still see them on some surviving stone carvings from the period. However, as soon as you died, they were promptly abandoned and forgotten. It's a perfect little symbol of your personality, a genuine, if slightly pedantic, intellectual who used his absolute power to try and win a grammatical argument with the entire Roman world. But why, then, do the ancient sources, particularly Suetonius and Tacitus, often portray you so negatively? Why does the image of the fool persist? This is a hot topic of debate for historians. The answer likely lies in how you chose to run your administration. You distrusted the Senate, who you knew despised you, so you bypassed them. You relied on a small group of trusted advisors to run the day-to-day business of the empire. These advisors were not senators or aristocrats, they were former slaves, talented Greek freedmen like Narcissus and Pallas. In the eyes of the Roman elite, this was an unforgivable scandal. To them, being forced to go through a former slave to get a decision from the emperor was the ultimate humiliation. These freedmen became incredibly powerful and wealthy, effectively running the empire on your behalf. So the senatorial historians, who wrote the history of your reign, painted you as a weak, doddering old man who was completely controlled by his manipulative ex-slave advisors. They couldn't admit that you were an effective ruler who had deliberately cut them out of power. So they attacked your character instead, creating the caricature of the puppet emperor that has been so influential for centuries. The idiot emperor might just be one of the most successful smear campaigns in history. You may be a surprisingly competent emperor in the administrative and military spheres, but your private life, the life inside the palace, is a complete and utter disaster. And the source of this chaos is your wife, the young, beautiful, and wildly ambitious Messalina. You are her third husband, much older than her, and she seems to have married you purely for the position it would bring her. As empress, she quickly establishes herself as a formidable power within the court, a stark contrast to your own unassuming, scholarly demeanor. While you are busy with aqueducts and legal reforms, she is busy with court intrigue, accumulating wealth, and if the ancient sources are to be believed, indulging in a personal life of staggering promiscuity. The stories about Messalina, mostly from the historian Tacitus and the poet Juvenal, are the stuff of legend. They paint a portrait not just of an unfaithful wife, but of a woman with an insatiable and pathological sexual appetite. The most famous story, and it's a truly jaw-dropping one, comes from the writer Pliny the Elder. He claims that Messalina, Empress of Rome, once entered into a competition with a well-known professional prostitute to see who could take on more partners in a 24-hour period. According to the tale, Messalina spent all night working out of a cell in a common brothel, and by morning, she had won the contest, exhausting herself but remaining, as Pliny puts it, unsatisfied. She was, in this telling, the undisputed champion of debauchery in all of Rome. These stories go on and on. It's said that she would force the wives of high-ranking senators to have affairs with her at the palace, often while their husbands were present, as a way of demonstrating her power and humiliating them. She was also notoriously corrupt. She and your freedmen advisors would sell political offices, citizenships, and legal judgments to the highest bidder, amassing a gigantic personal fortune behind your back. Anyone who crossed her or stood in her way a rival for a lover's affection. A senator who refused her advances, someone whose property she coveted would find themselves accused of treason and swiftly executed. You, absorbed in your state papers, seem to have been completely oblivious to the reign of terror and corruption your wife was conducting in your own home. Or perhaps you were aware but were too intimidated by her to do anything about it. Here's a small, insidious detail of her alleged activities. She didn't just have affairs, she forced aristocrats into them. One handsome young nobleman, M. Nestor, an actor you particularly admired, repeatedly refused her advances out of fear of your wrath. Messalina, frustrated, went directly to you. She complained that M. Nestor was refusing to obey one of her orders. You, without asking what the order was, summoned the actor and commanded him to obey your wife in all things. Now trapped by a direct imperial command, had no choice but to begin an affair with the empress. It's a story that perfectly captures Messalina's cunning and your own apparent cluelessness. But was any of this true? This is one of the most hotly debated questions in Roman history. Was Messalina really the nymphomaniac monster the sources describe, or is this another case of extreme character assassination? Similar to what was done to Tiberius on Capri, many modern historians are extremely skeptical. The sources are all men from the senatorial class who were hostile to powerful, politically active women. An empress who wielded real influence, who challenged their authority, was a threat. The easiest way to discredit a powerful woman in ancient Rome was to attack her sexual morality. By painting her as a depraved addict, they could undermine her political power and portray her as unfit for her station. It's also important to remember that you, Claudius, were seen as a weak man controlled by your advisors and your wife. Blaming Messalina for the executions and corruption of your reign was a convenient way to criticize your rule without attacking you, the emperor, directly. It's entirely possible that Messalina was ambitious, ruthless, and perhaps unfaithful. But the story of the brothel competition is almost certainly a wild exaggeration, a piece of political slander that has been passed down as fact for centuries. The real Messalina is lost to us, buried under a mountain of hostile propaganda. The whole sordid affair comes to a head in the year 48 AD. While you are away from Rome visiting the new port at Ostia, Messalina does something so audacious, so unbelievably reckless, that it's difficult to comprehend. She decides to marry another man. Her chosen partner is Gaius Silius, a handsome young senator-elect who she has forced to divorce his own wife. They hold an actual, public wedding ceremony in Rome, complete with witnesses and sacrifices. What was she thinking? Was it a genuine coup attempt, a plan to depose you and elevate her new husband to the throne? Or was it the ultimate act of a thrill-seeker who had become so addicted to risk that she no longer had any sense of boundaries? Historians are still baffled by this move. It seems too blatant, too clumsy to be a serious plot. Whatever her motive, it was a fatal miscalculation. Your powerful freedman, Narcissus, who saw Messalina as a rival, realized this was his chance to destroy her. He rushes to Ostia, tells you everything, and convinces you that your life is in danger. For the first time, you are forced to see the truth about your wife. The bubble has burst, and the fallout will be swift and brutal. The news hits you like a physical blow. Your freedman Narcissus, his voice laced with panic, lays it all out. Messalina has married another man in a public ceremony. The city is buzzing with the scandal. He convinces you that this is not just an affair, but a coup d'etat. Silius and Messalina are planning to murder you and seize the throne. You are, for once, decisive. Spurred on by Narcissus and terrified for your life, you rush back to Rome. The full power of the state is brought down upon Messalina and her circle. Gaius Silius and his key supporters are arrested and executed immediately, without a formal trial. The party is over. Messalina, realizing the catastrophic nature of her mistake, panics. She flees to the gardens of Lucullus, a property she had ruthlessly acquired. She tries to send messages to you, begging for a chance to plead her case. She knows her only hope is to get in front of you, to use her influence to win your sympathy. You were, after all, known to be easily swayed and prone to moments of clemency. Narcissus and your other advisors know this too. You will forgive her, and then she will undoubtedly have them all killed for their role in her downfall. They have to ensure she never reaches you. You are in the polis, a mess of conflicting emotions. You've had dinner, you've had some wine, and your anger is stuffed into a kind of weary sadness. According to Tacitus, you mutter in order to let the poor creature be heard tomorrow. Narcissus hears this and knows he has to act immediately. He takes matters into his own hands, without a direct order from you. But pretending he has one, he sends a tribune and a handful of soldiers to the gardens of Lucullus. They find Messalina there with her mother. The soldiers are silent, a grim audience to a family tragedy. Her mother, knowing there is no hope, urges Messalina to take her own life, to die with some dignity. But Messalina, who had been so bold and ruthless in her life, is now paralyzed by fear. She just weeps. Finally, the tribune, growing impatient, draws his sword and kills her. The empress is dead. The next morning, when you ask for her, A servant simply informs you that she has perished. You show no emotion, you don't ask how or why, and you simply continue with your meal. With Messalina gone, you are once again single. But an emperor cannot remain unmarried for long. It's a political necessity. A new power struggle erupts in the palace among your freedmen, each of whom backs a different candidate for your new wife. Then the winner of this contest is the most unlikely, and in Roman eyes, the most disturbing candidate of all, your own niece, Agrippina the Younger. She is the daughter of your beloved brother Germanicus and the sister of the mad Emperor Caligula. She is ambitious, intelligent, and utterly ruthless. There's just one major problem: Roman law and custom strictly forbid an uncle from marrying his niece. It was considered incest. To get around this, your supporters launch a carefully orchestrated political campaign. They have a friendly senator give a speech arguing that for the good of the state, you must marry Agrippina. She is of imperial blood. She has a son from a previous marriage who could be a potential heir, and such a union would consolidate the family. The Senate, eager to please you, dutifully passes a special law making it legal for an uncle to marry his brother's daughter, and so you marry Agrippina. You have bent the laws of gods and men to make this union happen, a decision you will come to regret. Agrippina is nothing like Messalina. She is not interested in secret love affairs or drunken parties. She is interested in one thing and one thing only: power. And she has a clear plan to get it. Here's a strange detail that illustrates Agrippina's immediate influence. She convinced you to recall the philosopher Seneca from exile. Seneca was a brilliant writer and thinker who had been banished years earlier, possibly at Messalina's instigation. Agrippina brings him back to Rome and appoints him as the tutor for her young son, Lucius Domitius Aecinobarbus, the boy who the world would come to know as Nero. It was a clever move. It gave her son a prestigious, brilliant teacher and brought a powerful intellectual ally into her camp. The education Seneca gave Nero would shape him into the artist emperor he would later become. The historical debate surrounding your death is one of Rome's great whodunits. In the autumn of 54 AD, you die after eating a meal. The official cause of death is old age and natural causes, but almost no one in Rome believed it. The historian Tacitus gives us the classic account. Agrippina, feeling her position was secure and that her son Nero was ready, decided it was time for you to go. She enlisted the help of a notorious poisoner named Locusta. The poison was to be administered in your favorite dish, a plate of mushrooms. The plan worked. You ate the mushrooms and fell gravely ill. However, you didn't die immediately. You lingered. Agrippina, panicking that the plot would be discovered, resorted to Plan B. She had your doctor, who was in on the plot, pretend to help you by making you vomit. He used a feather dipped in a fast-acting poison, tickling the back of your throat with it under the guise of inducing vomiting. This second dose did the trick. You were dead. Agrippina had cleared the way for her son. Is this story true? It's impossible to say for sure. You were 63 years old and in poor health. A sudden death from a stroke or heart attack is entirely plausible, but the timing was incredibly convenient for Agrippina and Nero. The mushroom story is so specific and was so widely believed at the time that most historians think there's probably some truth to it. The good Emperor Claudius, the scholar who steadied the ship after Caligula's madness, meets his end not in battle or by an assassin's blade, but allegedly at the hands of his own wife, a victim of the one thing he could never manage: his own family. The stage is now set for the final and most infamous emperor of the dynasty, Agrippina's boy Nero. You are now Nero, a boy of just 16, and you are the emperor of Rome. You didn't scheme or fight for it. Your mother, Agrippina, did all the dirty work for you. She married her uncle Claudius, convinced him to adopt you and name you as his heir over his own son, Britannicus, and then, most likely, she poisoned him to clear the way for your accession. Now she stands beside you, the real power behind the throne. Poetry and chariot racing. The Roman world looks at you and hopes for the best. The first 5 years of your reign are so peaceful and well-governed that they become legendary. The historian Trajan would later refer to this period as the quinquu ennium Neronis, or Nero's 5 years, a golden age of stability and good governance. But it isn't really you who is governing. The empire is being run by a committee of 3 very capable people: your mother, Agrippina, who holds the ultimate authority, your old tutor, the philosopher Seneca, who handles the administration and writes your speeches, and the tough, no-nonsense Praetorian prefect, Sextus Saphronius Borus, who keeps the military in line. This triumvirate works beautifully. They cooperate to manage the empire effectively. Taxes are lowered, the justice system is fair, and the Senate is treated with respect. You, Nero, are the public face of this stable government. Your duties mostly consist of showing up for ceremonies, reading the elegant speeches Seneca writes for you, and indulging your artistic hobbies. For a time it seems like the perfect arrangement. You spend your days practicing the lyre, writing poetry, and training as a charioteer. These are your true passions. You see yourself not as a general or a politician, but as a great artist. This was, for a Roman emperor, a deeply strange and slightly embarrassing ambition. Singing, acting, and competing in athletic events were things done by professionals of low social status, not by the ruler of the world. But Seneca and Borus indulge you, figuring it's better to have you distracted by your hobbies than interfering with their running of the state. They try to keep your performances private, held within the palace, to avoid a public scandal. You are, for now, content to be the artist-in-chief, leaving the boring work of government to others. Here's a small detail that reveals the early power dynamics of your reign. The first coins issued under your rule were unique. They featured your portrait on one side and your mother Agrippina's portrait on the other, the two of them facing each other. This was unprecedented. No woman had ever been depicted so prominently on Roman coinage. It was a clear statement from Agrippina. She was not just the emperor's mother, she was his co-ruler. But as time went on, the design of the coins changed. Later coins show your portrait as larger, with your mother's smaller portrait behind you, and finally, her image disappears from the coins altogether. You can literally track her fall from power through the changing iconography of the money. The problem is, you are growing up. A 16-year-old boy might be content to be guided by his mother and his advisors, but a 20-year-old man starts to want to make his own decisions. And your mother, Agrippina, is not someone who gives up power easily. She is a domineering, controlling figure who is scheming to put you on the throne. She expects you to remain her obedient puppet forever. The first major crack in your relationship appears over a woman. You fall in love with a former slave girl named Act. Agrippina is furious. She sees Act as a rival for your affection and influence. She berates you, she threatens you, she reminds you that she is the one who gave you the throne and she can just as easily take it away and give it to your stepbrother, Britannicus. This is a fatal mistake on her part. By threatening you with Britannicus, she signs his death warrant. Shortly after, at a palace dinner party, the 14-year-old Britannicus suddenly has a seizure and dies. The official story is that he died from an epileptic fit. The historian Tacitus tells a much darker story. He claims that you, with the help of the same poisoner your mother used on Claudius, had your stepbrother poisoned. The poison was cold water. He had complained his wine was too hot. He collapsed, foaming at the mouth, and died within minutes. You calmly explained to the horrified dinner guests that he'd had these fits since childhood and would be fine. You showed no remorse. You had eliminated the only other viable heir to the throne. Your mother's primary threat against you was now gone. The historical debate here is intense. Did you, Nero, really murder your teenage stepbrother in cold blood, or did he, by a tragic coincidence, happen to die of a sudden illness? A story that was then sensationalized by hostile historians Suetonius and Tacitus are convinced it was murder. They paint it as your first truly monstrous act, the moment the charming young artist revealed a cold-blooded killer underneath. Some modern historians urge caution, pointing out that sudden death in adolescence is not unheard of and that the poisoning story is almost too perfectly villainous. But the circumstances are deeply suspicious. With Britannicus gone, your mother has lost her leverage. The quinque and neum neron is beginning to tarnish. The committee that ran the empire is starting to fracture. You are beginning to assert your own will, and you have discovered a taste for ruthless, decisive action. The stage is being set for a much bigger, more tragic confrontation, the final, deadly power struggle between you and the woman who created you, your mother. The bond between you and your mother, Agrippina, is now hopelessly broken. The murder of Britomachus has removed her trump card, and your love affair with the beautiful and ambitious Papa, Aeneas Abina, has driven the final wedge between you. Poppaea despises Agrippina and constantly whispers in your ear that you will never be a true emperor as long as you live in your mother's shadow. You are torn. This is the woman who gave you everything, who risked her life to make you emperor. But she is also a suffocating presence, a constant reminder of your own initial powerlessness. Seneca and Varus, your advisors, try to mediate, but they can see the situation is spiraling out of control. Your mother, feeling her influence slip away, grows more desperate, more shrewish, more critical. You begin to feel that the empire isn't big enough for both of you. But how do you kill the daughter of Germanicus, the sister of Caligula, the wife of Claudius, and the mother of the emperor? She is a revered, almost sacred figure. A simple execution or a convenient illness would be too obvious and could cause a massive public backlash. You need a clever solution, a death that looks like an accident. And so you devise one of the most bizarre, elaborate, and comically unsuccessful assassination plots in history. You know your mother loves the sea. You invite her to a holiday festival at the resort town of Baiae on the Bay of Naples. You put on a great show of reconciliation, embracing her, dining with her, and treating her with the utmost affection. For her journey back to her own villa, across the bay, you use a magnificent vessel, but it has been cunningly designed by your engineers to collapse on command. The plan is simple and, you think, brilliant. Once the boat is out in the calm, moonlit bay, the crew will release the pins holding the lead-weighted canopy over the main cabin. The canopy will crash down, crushing Agrippina, and then the rest of the boat will fall apart and sink. Her body will be lost to the sea. It will be a tragic accident, a terrible shipwreck. You will mourn her publicly, and no one will ever suspect a thing. The plan is put into motion. Agrippina, reassured by your sudden display of affection, boards the treacherous boat. You wave her off from the shore. Out on the water, the signal is given. The mechanism is triggered. The lead canopy comes crashing down, but it gets snagged on the side of the couch she is reclining on. It kills one of her attendants, but Agrippina herself is only slightly injured, protected by the high sides of her couch. Then the second part of the plan fails, which was supposed to break apart and sink, refuses to cooperate. It just lists to one side. In the confusion, Agrippina's loyal servants, realizing what is happening, start shouting that they are the empress, hoping to draw the attack to themselves so she can escape. The assassins, fooled, beat them to death with oars. Meanwhile, the real Agrippina, shrewd and resilient as ever, quietly steps over the side of the boat and into the water. Despite being nearly 44 years old, she is a strong swimmer. She swims silently in the dark until she is picked up by a small fishing boat and taken safely to her villa. The perfect crime has been a complete fiasco. Here's a small but telling detail from the historian Tacitus. When news of the shipwreck reached you, and you learned that your mother had not arrived but knew exactly what had happened, you fell into a state of pure panic. You paced your room, terrified of her inevitable revenge. You imagined her rousing the Praetorian Guard against you, appealing to the Senate, whipping up the people. Your advisors, Seneca and Varus, are summoned in the middle of the night. They see your terror. They know the secret is out, and now there is no turning back. Boris, the tough old soldier, finally states the obvious: she has to be killed, and it has to be done now. The debate among historians is whether Seneca and Boris were complicit from the beginning. Did they help you plan the collapsing boat? Tacitus portrays them as being horrified by your plan, only helping you with the cover-up after it failed. Other historians are more cynical, suggesting they were likely aware of your intentions and simply stood back to see how it would play out. Once the plan failed so spectacularly, they had to step in to protect you, and by extension themselves. Their hands might not have been clean. So you send an assassin, your naval captain Incitatus, the very man who designed the trick boat, to finish the job. He and his men surround Agrippina's villa. They burst into her bedroom. She is there, reclining on a couch with only one servant by her side. When she sees the soldiers, she knows her time has come. She looks at Anna's story, points to her own womb. "Strike here," she says, "for this poor Nero." The soldiers cock her down. The matricide is complete. The artist emperor have committed the most heinous crime in the Roman moral code. You have killed the woman who gave you life. The last restraint on your behavior is now gone. The golden age is definitively over, and the path is now clear for your descent into true tyranny. You have done the unthinkable. You have murdered your own mother. A profound sense of dread and guilt settles over you. You are terrified of how Rome will react. You expect condemnation, riots, perhaps even a military coup. Seneca, ever the loyal spin doctor, writes a speech for you to deliver to the Senate. In it, you claim that Agrippina was plotting to assassinate you, and that she took her own life out of shame when her plot was discovered. The Senate, cowed into submission, officially accepts your version of events. They pass motions thanking the gods for your salvation and even declare a public holiday. To your surprise and relief, the city remains calm. The people seem indifferent. You have gotten away with it. This realization is a dangerous one. It teaches you that you can do anything, commit any crime, and face no consequences. The last moral guardrail has been shattered, with Agrippina gone, and your old advisors Boris, who dies shortly after, perhaps also poisoned, and Seneca, who retires in fear, no longer in control. You are finally free. Free to be the artist you always wanted to be. You throw yourself into your passions with abandon. You begin to give public performances, singing your own poetry while accompanying yourself on the lyre. You compete in chariot races in the Circus Maximes. At first, you perform only for private invited audiences, but soon, you crave a bigger stage. You institute a new festival, the Nero Nia, and you are, of course, the star contestant. The Roman elite are horrified. Their emperor, the divine Augustus's descendant, is behaving like a common stage player, but they have no choice but to attend, to applaud, and to vote for you as the winner of every competition. And then, in the hot summer of 64 AD, disaster strikes. A fire breaks out in the shops around the Circus Maximus. This is not unusual in a city like Rome, a crowded tinderbox of wooden tenements. But this fire is different. It rages out of control. Fanned by a strong wind, it spreads with terrifying speed through the narrow, winding streets. For 6 days and 7 nights, the fire consumes the city. Entire districts are wiped out. The great monuments on the Palatine hills are damaged. Thousands are left homeless, their possessions and livelihoods turned to ash. It is the greatest catastrophe to hit the city of Rome in centuries. Where are you when all this is happening? You are at your villa in the seaside resort of Antium. When news of the fire reaches you, you rush back to Rome and, by all credible accounts, you behave like a responsible leader. You organize relief efforts, opening your own gardens and public buildings to shelter the homeless. You bring in food supplies from neighboring towns and lower the price of grain. You do everything an emperor should do in a crisis. But a rumor begins to spread. A rumor so powerful and so damning that it will define your legacy forever. The rumor is that you started the fire yourself. Why? Because you wanted to clear land to build a magnificent new palace. The story gets even more elaborate. It is said that while the city burned, you went to the top of a tower, dressed in a theatrical costume, and sang a song about the fall of Troy, playing your lyre as you watched the flames consume your capital. This image of you, fiddling while Rome burns, is one of the most enduring in all of history. But is it true? Almost certainly not. The most reliable historian for this period, Tacitus, who was a boy in Rome at the time, explicitly states that this was a rumor and questions its validity. He confirms you were in Antium when the fire started and that you lead the relief efforts. The story of you singing about Troy likely arose from your known love of theater. You were an artist, and the burning city was a dramatic, tragic spectacle. Perhaps you did make a comparison to Troy, and this was twisted by your enemies into the story of you celebrating the disaster. The fitting part is a later embellishment. The fiddle hadn't been invented yet. It would have been the lyre, but the truth doesn't matter. The rumor is too good to fitting for a ruler seen as a self-obsessed performer. The people, looking for someone to blame for their suffering, latch onto it. You, the artist emperor, are now seen as the arsonist emperor. This brings us to a historical debate that is still very much alive. If you didn't start the fire, who did? Tacitus himself says the origin is uncertain. It could have been an accident or arson. Some historians speculate that if it was arson, it might have been started by radical members of a new religious sect who were preaching about a coming fiery apocalypse. Others think it was simply a tragic accident that was politically exploited. We will never know for sure, but you have a massive public relations problem. The population of Rome believes you burned down their homes. You need a scapegoat, and you need one fast. You find the perfect targets, that small, misunderstood religious sect whose members kept to themselves and were viewed with suspicion by the Roman populace. They were called Christians. They were accused of hatred of the human race because they refused to worship the Roman gods. You declare that they are the ones who started the Great Fire. You round them up and make a public spectacle of their execution. Tacitus, who had no love for the Christians, describes the horror of what followed. Some were dressed in animal skins and torn apart by dogs in the arena. Others were crucified. And in a final, ghoulish act of cruelty, some were covered in pitch, tied to stakes in your gardens, and set on fire at night, to be used as human torches to illuminate your parties. It is a moment of horrific, state-sponsored brutality. You did not start the fire, but to save your own reputation, you unleashed a wave of terror on a defenseless minority, an act that would be remembered for millennia and would mark the first major Roman persecution of the Christian faith. The burning of Rome has led to an even darker chapter in your reign. Having scapegoated the Christians for the Great Fire, you now have a blank canvas. Vast swaths of central Rome have been cleared, not by your design, but by disaster. You see this not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity. This is your chance to rebuild Rome in your own image, to create a city worthy of your artistic genius. And at the heart of this new city will be your new home. A palace so vast and so opulent it will make all previous imperial residences look like humble cottages. You call it the Domus Aurea or the Golden House, but your vision doesn't stop at a new palace. You embark on a project that truly reveals your soul. You decide to go on a grand artistic tour of Greece. You've always felt that your artistic talents, your singing, your poetry, your lyre playing were wasted on the brutish, uncultured Romans. They might have pulled you out of fear, but they don't truly understand your genius. The Greeks, on the other hand, are the originators of art and culture. They invented tragedy, music, and the Olympic Games. To be acclaimed by the Greeks, to win their approval, would be the ultimate validation of your talent. So, in 66 AD, you pack up your lyres, your costumes, and a massive entourage, and you set sail for Greece. You are leaving the administration of Rome in the hands of a trusted freedman, effectively abandoning your duties as emperor to pursue your dream of being a rock star. Your tour of Greece is one of the most surreal episodes in Roman history. It lasts for over a year. You decide to compete in all the major Pan-Hellenic games: the Olympic, the Pythian, the Isthmian, and the Nemean. The problem is these games are held on a 4-year cycle, not all at once. This is no obstacle for you. You are the emperor. You simply command the festival or their games to take place during the year you are there. So you compete in all of them, dutifully obey. You also add new competitions in music and poetry to the traditionally athletic events, so you can showcase your primary talents. You compete in everything. You compete as a singer, a tragic actor, a lyre player, and a poet. And, of course, you win every single competition you enter. The judges, terrified for their lives, have no choice but to award you the victor's crown every time. You accumulate a staggering 1808 first-place prizes during your tour, but the most absurd moment comes at the Olympic Games. You decide you want to compete in the chariot race. Not the standard 4-horse chariot race, but a spectacular 10-horse chariot race. You have a magnificent chariot built, pulled by 10 powerful steeds. The race begins. You, an inexperienced charioteer, immediately lose control of the massive team of horses. You are thrown from the chariot and crash to the ground. Your attendants rush to your side, pick you up, and place you back in the chariot. You are too shaken to continue the race and drop out. And then, the judges make their announcement. The winner of the 10-horse chariot races. You winner of the 10-horse chariot race, the Emperor Nero. Their reasoning: you would have won, had you not fallen out. Here's a small detail that highlights the sheer scale of this ego trip. After winning all your victories, you don't just take the leafy crowns. You have them all gathered up and carried with you in a massive procession. When you finally return to Italy, you don't enter Rome quietly. You stage a grand triumphal parade, but not a military triumph. It is an artistic triumph. You ride into the city on the same chariot that Augustus had used for his triumphs, wearing a purple robe and a crown of wild olive. In front of you march people carrying banners listing your artistic victories. Behind you, an army of attendants carries your 1808 prize crowns. It is a spectacle of self-aggrandizement that leaves the traditional Roman aristocracy speechless with disgust. The historical debate here isn't about whether these events happened, they are well documented. The debate is about your motivation. Was this just pure, unadulterated narcissism from a man who had completely lost touch with reality, or was there a political calculation at play? Some historians argue that this was a deliberate attempt to redefine what it meant to be a Roman emperor. You were rejecting the old model of the emperor as a military general and statesman, the model established by Augustus. Instead, you were promoting a new Hellenistic model of the ruler, as a patron of the arts, a cultural leader, a kind of philosopher king meets pop star. In your eyes, winning a poetry competition in Greece was a greater achievement than conquering a barbarian province. You were trying to force a cultural revolution on a deeply conservative society. It was a bold, and ultimately disastrous vision. While you are away in Greece, living out your artistic fantasies, Rome is being neglected. The treasury is being drained to pay for your lavish tour and your massive building projects. Conspiracies are brewing. The legions on the frontiers are growing restless, led by stern, old-school generals who are disgusted by the stories they hear of their emperor's theatrical antics. Your Greek tour, which you saw as the crowning achievement of your life, is seen by everyone else as the final proof that you are unfit to rule. You may have conquered Greece's stages, but you are losing control of your empire. The adoring crowds and terrified judges in Greece have given you a false sense of security. The reality waiting for you back in Rome is far harsher. While you've been on your triumphant tour of Greece, collecting crowns and accolades, back in Rome, the Golden House, your Domus Aurea, is rising from the ashes of the Great Fire. This is not just a palace, it's a statement. It is the physical manifestation of your ego, a sprawling complex that covers a vast area of the city center, estimated to be anywhere from 100 to 300 acres. To build it, you've seized public land and the property of aristocrats whose hide in the fire. The Roman people, many of whom are still living in squalid temporary housing, look on as this monument to self-indulgence takes shape. Imagine walking into the Golden House. It is designed to be a countryside villa in the heart of the city. The entrance features a colossal bronze statue of yourself, over 100 feet tall, the Colossus Nero is. The statue is so massive that it will later give its name to the nearby amphitheater, the Colosseum. The palace complex itself is not a single building, but a series of pavilions, gardens, and porticos set in a meticulously landscaped park. There are vineyards, pastures with grazing animals, and forests filled with wild beasts. At the center of it all is a massive artificial lake, right where the Colosseum stands today, a shimmering body of water in the middle of urban Rome. The interiors of the pavilions are where the true opulence is on display. The walls are not just painted, they are covered in gleaming white marble, intricate mosaics, and frescoes by the most famous artists of the day. And of course there's gold leaf cover the ceilings and walls, giving the palace its name. Precious gems and mother of pearl are inlaid into the decorations. It is a dazzling, almost blinding display of wealth. You are creating a fantasy world, a private paradise where you can live out your artistic and divine ambitions, insulated from the gritty reality of the city around you. the most famous feature of the Golden House, and a marvel of Roman engineering, is the revolving dining room. According to Suetonius, the main banqueting hall had a circular, domed ceiling that would slowly revolve day and night, in time with the heavens. The ceiling was painted with stars and constellations, creating the illusion that your guests were dining beneath a moving sky. As if that weren't enough, panels in the ceiling could slide open to shower your guests with flowers and spray them with perfume. It is the ultimate dinner party trick, a piece of theatrical engineering designed to awe and overwhelm your visitors, reinforcing your status as a master of not just art, but the universe itself. This incredible feat of engineering has long puzzled archaeologists and historians. How did they do it for a long time? It was dismissed as a fantastical exaggeration by Suetonius. But in 2009, archaeologists excavating on the Palatine Hill uncovered what they believe are the foundations of this very room, a massive circular pillar and a series of spherical mechanisms that could have supported a rotating wooden floor. Or is it part of a later structure if it is the room? Was it the ceiling that moved, as Suetonius claimed, or was it the floor? The mechanics of making a massive ceiling revolve are incredibly complex, while a rotating floor powered by a water mill or by slave power is more feasible. The discovery has brought a story once considered pure myth into the realm of possibility, a testament to the incredible ingenuity of your Roman engineers. The Golden House is your masterpiece, but it is also a political catastrophe. The sheer expense of the project is bankrupting the state. To pay for it, you have to devalue the currency and seize the wealth of senators, often on trumped-up charges of treason. You even raid the temples of their treasures. The resentment builds. The Golden House becomes a symbol of your tyranny, of the vast gulf between your luxurious fantasy life and the struggles of ordinary Romans. A popular piece of graffiti appeared in the city. Rome has become one man's house. Citizens, you should migrate to VII. If that house hasn't taken over VII too. This project, more than anything else, solidifies the opposition against you. The military governors on the frontiers, men like Galba in Spain and Vindex in Gaul, are hearing reports of this decadent palace being built with money that should be paying their soldiers. They see an emperor who has abandoned his military duties to play architect and party planner. The Golden House, designed to be the eternal monument to your greatness, instead becomes the catalyst for your destruction, and its walls are closing in on you. The dream world you had so carefully constructed is about to collide with the harsh reality of a failing empire and a military that has finally had enough. The dream is unraveling. While you are lost in the gilded halls of your Golden House, rehearsing new songs and planning extravagant parties, the empire is starting to crack. The first tremor comes from Gaul, where the governor Julius Vindex, a man of Gallic royal descent, openly rebels against you. He doesn't want the throne for himself, he simply declares you a public enemy, a bad actor who is unfit to rule. He calls for a better emperor. Soon after, a much more serious threat emerges. The elderly and respected governor of Hispania, Servius Sulpicius Galba, decides to join the revolt. Galba is an old-school aristocrat, a career general from a distinguished family. When his legions declare him emperor, the rebellion gains a powerful legitimacy that Vindex is surprising lack. The news finally shakes you out of your artistic lethargy. At first, you don't take it seriously. You joke that you will go and confront the rebels with an orchestra of female musicians and win them over with a sad song. But as more and more reports come in, as legions in Africa and along the Rhine begin to waver in their loyalty, the reality of your situation begins to sink in. The Senate, which has lived in fear of you for years, now sees its chance. They sense the shift in power. Your allies begin to abandon you, melting away into the shadows. Your final days are a frantic, pathetic scramble. You concoct wild, desperate plans. One day you plan to flee to Egypt and live a quiet life as a scholar and musician. The next, you plan to march out to face the rebels alone and armed, and weep until they surrender. You imagine yourself delivering a grand victorious speech, which you immediately begin to compose. You are swinging wildly between manic optimism and crippling despair. You are completely isolated. Even the Praetorian Guard, your own bodyguards, have been bought off. Their prefect Nymphidius Sabinus has promised them a massive donative in Galba's name if they will abandon you. When you summon them for protection, no one shows up. The palace is silent. You are truly alone. You wake up in the middle of the night to find that even your personal servants have fled, taking your bedding and a small box containing your private stash of poison with them. You wander the empty, echoing halls of the Golden House, calling for someone, anyone. There is no answer. You are a ghost in your own gilded paradise. In desperation, you run to the homes of your few remaining friends, but the doors are all locked. You return to your chambers, a broken man, to throw yourself into the Tiber, but you find you lack the courage. All you want is a hiding place, a quiet spot to collect your thoughts. One of your few remaining loyal freedmen, Paeon, offers you his villa, a few miles outside the city. Disguising yourself in a drab cloak, you cover your head and mount a horse. With only for loyal companions, you flee Rome in the dead of night. It is a humiliating escape. As you ride, a small earthquake shakes the ground, and a flash of lightning illuminates the sky, a sign of the gods' displeasure. You have to ride past the Praetorian camp, and you can hear the soldiers inside cursing your name and cheering for Galba. It is the final confirmation that you have lost everything. You abandon your horse and make the rest of the journey on foot, scrambling through thickets and reeds, your face and clothes torn by thorns. You have to crawl on your hands and knees through a narrow tunnel to get into the back of Paeon's villa. You are now a fugitive, hiding in a small, shabby room, the emperor of the Roman world reduced to a cowering wreck. A messenger arrives with the latest news from Rome. The Senate has met. They have officially declared you a public enemy. This means that anyone can kill you without trial and claim a reward. They have also sentenced you to be punished in the ancestral way. You are told it means being stripped naked, having your head locked in a wooden fork, and being beaten to death with rods. The thought of this final, public humiliation is too much to bear. You know you have to end your own life, but you can't do it. You hold a dagger to your throat, but you hesitate. You ask one of your companions to kill himself first, to show you how it's done. No one volunteers. You weep and wail, bemoaning your fate. To have lived is a shame, you cry, Nero. This is not worthy of you. You must be resolute. Then you hear the sound of horses approaching. The soldiers sent by the Senate to arrest you are here. This is it. The final moment. Spurred on by the sound of their arrival, you finally find a sliver of courage. With the help of your freedman, Ephroditos, who guides your hand, you thrust the dagger into your throat. As you lie there bleeding, the first Roman officer bursts into the room. He rushes to your side, trying to staunch the wound, pretending he has come to save you. Your eyes glazing over, and with your last breath, you utter your famous, final words, qualis artifex perio, what an artist dies in me. This final line is the subject of endless historical fascination. Was it a moment of pure, unadulterated narcissism, a man so self-obsessed that his last thought was of his own wasted talent, or was it a recognition that your entire life, your entire reign, had been a performance, and that the final curtain was now falling on the greatest show on earth? It is, perhaps, the most fitting epitaph for the artist-emperor. You die not as a soldier or a statesman, but as a tragic actor in the final scene of your own play. You are dead. The last of the Julio-Claudians, the dynasty that began with the divine Augustus, has perished in a shabby villa, a victim of his own theatrical reign. The news of your death spreads through Rome, and the reaction is mixed. The senators and aristocrats celebrate. They run through the streets, putting on the cap of liberty as if the republic had been restored. The common people, however, are more ambivalent. Many of them had enjoyed your games, your generosity, and your flamboyant style. For years to come, loyal followers will place flowers on your tomb. But in the halls of power, there is only relief. The monster is gone. The problem is, no one knows what comes next. Your death creates a massive power vacuum. For the first time since the days of Mark Antony and Octavian, there is no clear successor, no designated heir. The Julio-Claudian bloodline, which had provided a century of admittedly chaotic stability, has been extinguished. Power is now up for grabs, available to any man with enough legions and enough ambition to take it. The Roman world is about to learn a terrible secret, one that the historian Tacitus would later articulate. The secret of the empire was now revealed, that an emperor could be made elsewhere than at Rome. The Senate quickly recognizes Galba, the governor of Spain, as the new emperor. He begins his march towards Rome. But Galba is old, severe, and incredibly stingy. He makes a series of disastrous miscalculations. He refuses to pay the huge bourse that guard in his name, telling them, "I am accustomed to levy soldiers, not to buy them." This alienates the very men who control the capital. He also offends the powerful legions on the Rhine frontier by ignoring them. He is a man of the old republic, and he has no idea how to play the new game of imperial politics. His reign lasts only 7 months. In January of 16 AD, the legions in Germania declare their own commander, Aulus Vitellius, as emperor. A few weeks later, in Rome, the disgruntled Praetorian Guard finds their own candidate. A wealthy, ambitious senator named Marcus Salvius Otho, who had been a friend of yours, Nero, and whose wife Poppaea you had stolen, bribes the guard to proclaim him emperor. They march to the Forum, find the elderly Galba, and cut him down. But Vitellius and his powerful Rhine legions are already on their way to Italy. The first civil war in a century has begun. You now find yourself caught in the whirlwind of this chaotic year. Otho and Vitellius's forces clash in northern Italy. It is Roman against Roman, legion against legion. The discipline and order of the empire collapse. The Battle of Bedria comes as a bloodbath, with tens of thousands of Roman soldiers killed by their own countrymen. Otho's forces are defeated. Upon hearing the news, Otho, in a surprising act of noble sacrifice, decides to take his own life to prevent further bloodshed. He hopes his death will end the war. He is wrong. Vitellius marches into Rome and is declared emperor. His reign is marked by gluttony and excess. He is said to have spent a fortune on lavish banquets, indulging in exotic delicacies from all corners of the empire. He is a ruler for the moment with no long-term vision. Meanwhile, in the eastern provinces, another contender is emerging. The legions in Judea, Egypt, and Syria have been watching the chaos in Rome with disgust. They decide to put forward their own commander, a gruff, down-to-earth general named Titus Flacianus Vespasian. He is not a noble aristocrat like Galba or a foppish friend of Nero like Otho. He is a practical, professional soldier from a humble family. His legions declare him emperor, and the final phase of the civil war begins. Vespasian sends his armies west, while he secures Egypt, the breadbasket of Rome, cutting off the grain supply to the capital. The final confrontation is for the city of Rome itself. Vitellius's forces and Vespasian's legions fight a brutal battle in the very streets of the capital. The city that had been ravaged by your fire 5 years earlier is now ravaged by civil war. The temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus on the Capitoline Hill, the most sacred shrine in Rome, is burned to the ground during the fighting. It is a moment of profound sacrilege and a symbol of how far the empire has fallen, dragged through the streets, publicly tortured, and thrown into the Tiber. The war is over. Vespasian is the undisputed master of the Roman world. This whole bloody saga is now known as the Year of the Four Emperors Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and finally Vespasian. In the space of a single year, the empire has seen four rulers rise and fall. Historians still debate the significance of this year. Was it merely a chaotic blip, a violent but temporary breakdown of the system, or did it represent a fundamental change in the nature of Roman power? The consensus is that it was the latter. The year 16 AD proved that the emperor's power rested not on the Senate, not on the people of Rome, and not even on bloodline, but solely on the loyalty of the legions. The armies, not the politicians, were now the true kingmakers. This realization would shape the next centuries of Roman history, leading to a recurring cycle of military coups and civil wars. A quirky detail from this year of chaos is the story of a false Nero. Your memory was still so potent among some common people that several impostors appeared in the eastern provinces, claiming to be you, Nero, having survived the assassination attempt. They gathered followers and caused a good deal of trouble before they were caught and executed. It's a testament to the strange charisma you held, that even after your death, some were willing to believe you might just come back for a second act. But there would be no second act. The Julio-Claudian drama has ended. The Flavian dynasty, founded by the pragmatic soldier Vespasian, will now begin the long, difficult task of cleaning up the mess you left behind. The dust is finally settling on the year of the 4 emperors. The pragmatic soldier Vespasian is in charge now, busy cleaning up the mess and starting a new, more stable dynasty. The Julio-Claudian drama is over. But as you lie here drifting, a question lingers in the quiet air, a question that floats above the ashes of the golden house and the blood-soaked stones of the Forum. Why were they like this? Why did this one family, blessed with the ultimate power, produce such a gallery of bizarre, cruel and seemingly insane rulers? Was there something in the water on that, funnily enough, might be closer to the truth than you think? Let's explore one of the most persistent and intriguing theories for the madness of the emperor's lead poisoning. Imagine for a moment you are a wealthy Roman aristocrat. You live in a beautiful villa. You eat from elegant pewter plates. And for years you've been suffering from terrible gout, crippling headaches, and a constant, low-level irritability. You have trouble sleeping. You feel a strange metallic taste in your mouth. You become prone to fits of paranoia and rage. These are all classic symptoms of what the Romans called Saturnism and what we now call chronic lead poisoning. Lead, or plumbum in Latin, from which we get our word plumbing, was the Roman supermaterial. It was cheap, it was malleable, and it was everywhere. Most famously, it was used to make the water pipes that fed the private homes of the wealthy. The great aqueducts brought fresh water to the city, but the final leg of the journey, from the main distribution tank to your personal kitchen and bath, was often through a network of lead pipes. Every day, the water you drank, cooked with, and bathed in was flowing through these toxic tubes, slowly, imperceptibly leaching lead into your system. But the pipes were just the beginning. The exposure was relentless. The best wine was often stored in lead-lined amphorae. The most expensive cookware, the pots and pans used to prepare your elaborate banquet meals, were often made of lead or bronze with a high lead content. When you cooked something acidic, like tomatoes or wine sauces, the lead would dissolve directly into your food. Your plates, your wine jugs, all could be made of pewter, an alloy rich in lead. Even Roman cosmetics were a source. The fashionable upper-class woman, or even an emperor who cared about his appearance, would use a foundation made from white lead to achieve a pale, aristocratic complexion, absorbing the poison directly through their skin. It was a constant, low-level assault on the nervous system of the entire Roman elite. Now for the truly quirky, and perhaps most damning, piece of evidence in this theory. The Romans liked their wine sweet. But good, sweet wine was expensive. A common practice to improve the taste of cheap, sour wine was to use a sweetener called sapor, or diephorum to make it. You would take fermented grape juice and boil it down in a lead pot. The slow simmering process would cause lead from the pot to leach into the juice, creating a chemical compound called lead acetate. Lead acetate is incredibly toxic, but it has one other property: it is intensely sweet. It's often called sugar of lead, so Roman vintners were creating a super sweet, super toxic syrup that they would then add to their wine to mask its imperfections. You are in essence deliberately adding a potent neurotoxin to your daily drink just to improve the flavor. Imagine Tiberius on his island, Caligula at his surreal banquets, or you, Nero, at your debauched parties, draining goblet after goblet of the sweetened, poisoned wine. Night after night, year after year, the cumulative effect would be devastating. It could easily lead to the very symptoms our mad emperors displayed: cognitive decline, emotional volatility, paranoia, hallucinations, and violent outbursts. The lead poisoning theory offers a neat, scientific explanation for their behavior. They weren't just morally corrupt, their brains were being physically damaged by a lifetime of exposure to heavy metals. However, and this is where the academic debate gets really interesting, many modern historians think this theory is a bit too simple. They argue that the Romans weren't completely ignorant of lead's dangers. The architect Vitruvius, writing in the age of Augustus, specifically warned that water from lead pipes was injurious and recommended using clay pipes instead. Furthermore, much of the water that flowed into Rome was very hard, rich in calcium carbonate. This would have created a layer of mineral scale, the same kind of stuff you get in a kettle on the inside of the pipes, which would have acted as a barrier, preventing much of the lead from leaching into the water. And what about the skeletal evidence? Studies of Roman remains have indeed shown higher lead levels than in modern humans, but often not high enough to explain full-blown psychosis. It was certainly a problem, and likely contributed to widespread health issues. But was it enough to make you appoint your horse to the consulship? Probably not. The theory of lead poisoning as the single cause of imperial madness is now largely seen as an oversimplification. It was almost certainly a contributing factor to the poor health and foul tempers of the Roman elite, but it cannot, by itself, explain the unique and spectacular nature of their depravity. The poison in their wine may have been a real problem, but there was another, more potent poison at play: absolute, unchecked power. So, if lead poisoning isn't the sole culprit for this parade of imperial madness, what is? Before we delve into the psychology of it all, we need to take a step back and look at the men who told us these stories in the first place. You are not experiencing these reigns firsthand. You are hearing them through the filter of a handful of ancient historians, primarily men like Suetonius and Tacitus, and these men were not neutral, objective journalists. They were members of the senatorial class, with their own biases, their own agendas, and a flair for dramatic storytelling. We need to consider the source. Let's start with Gaius Suetonius Tranquillus, or just Suetonius to his friends. He was a scholar and a court official who served under the emperors Trajan and Hadrian, writing about a century after the events of your reign, Nero. His most famous work is the 12 Caesars, a collection of biographies from Julius Caesar to Domitian. And it is, without a doubt, one of the most entertaining and scandalous history books ever written. Suetonius was not interested in deep political analysis or military strategy. He was interested in gossip. He loved personal anecdotes, physical descriptions, juicy rumors, and sordid details. He tells us about Augustus's fear of lightning, Tiberius's perversions on Capri, and your own theatrical ambitions. He is the ancient equivalent of a celebrity tabloid reporter, and his goal was to entertain his wealthy Roman audience. When you read Suetonius, you have to imagine him as a professional storyteller, a man who knows that a story about Caligula trying to make his horse a consul is far more memorable than a dry analysis of tax policy. He organized his biographies topically, not chronologically. He would have a section on an emperor's virtues, a section on his family life, and most famously, a section on his vices. This structure encouraged exaggeration, as he sought out the most extreme examples to illustrate each point. Did Messalina really have a sex contest with a prostitute? Probably not. But it's a fantastic story that perfectly illustrates her alleged depravity, so into the book it goes. Suetonius is less a historian in the modern sense and more a curator of the wildest rumors of the age. Then you have Cornelius Tacitus. He is a far more serious and respected historian, often considered the greatest of them all. He was a senator and a consul himself, a man who saw Roman politics from the inside. His works, the Annals and the Histories, are masterpieces of Latin prose, filled with profound psychological insight into deep, world-weary cynicism about power. Unlike Suetonius, Tacitus is interested in cause and effect, in the moral decay of the Roman state. Tacitus writes from the perspective of a proud senator who has seen the dignity of his class crushed under the heel of narcissistic emperors. He has a deep-seated nostalgia for the lost virtues of the republic and a profound contempt for the imperial system. Tacitus is a master of innuendo. He will report a scandalous rumor that Livia poisoned Augustus's heirs, that you, Nero, poisoned Britannicus, and then add a phrase like, "or I would not dare to affirm it," though it was widely believed. He presents the slander while maintaining a veneer of scholarly detachment. He is an artist painting a dark, moody portrait of the early empire. He sees history as a great moral drama, a struggle between liberty represented by the doomed, noble senators and tyranny represented by the paranoid, corrupt emperors. He is not just reporting facts, he is crafting a powerful narrative with a clear political and moral message. This brings us to one of the most fundamental debates in Roman historiography: how much of the madness of the emperors was real, and how much was a literary creation, a character crafted by hostile writers. The image of the mad emperor became a standard trope. If you wanted to praise a current good emperor like Trajan, the best way to do it was to contrast him with the memory of a bad emperor like you or Caligula. The bad emperors became caricatures, symbols of everything that could go wrong when one man had too much power. Their reigns were written up as cautionary tales. A quirky detail that highlights this is the fate of your golden house. After your death, the emperors of the new Flavian dynasty made a very deliberate effort to give the land you had seized back to the people. They drained your artificial lake and, on that very spot, built the Flavian amphitheater, the Colosseum, a place of public entertainment for all Romans. They built a grand public bath complex over another part of the palace. It was a brilliant piece of propaganda. They were literally and symbolically burying your private, self-indulgent fantasy world under new public works that served the common good. The historical narrative followed the same pattern. The memory of your reign was buried under a mountain of negative stories to make your successors look better by comparison. So as you drift and listen to these tales, you must become a critical reader. You must see the hand of the author at work. The stories of your excesses and Caligula's cruelties are likely based on a kernel of truth. You are not benevolent rulers. But the most extreme, most theatrical, and most memorable details, the horse consul, the war against the sea, fiddling while Rome burns, these may be the product of literary embellishment, political slander. You are not just dealing with historical figures, you are dealing with literary characters, villains in a grand narrative written by the very men who considered you their enemy. The truth is in there somewhere, but it's wrapped in layers of rumor, bias, and brilliant, persuasive storytelling. So if it wasn't just lead in the wine, and it wasn't just the slander of biased historians, what was the real root of this spectacular dysfunction? Let's peel back the layers of myth and propaganda and try to imagine what it actually felt like to be you. To be the emperor. Let's talk about the sheer crushing and profoundly weird psychology of absolute power. From the moment you ascend the throne, you cease to be a normal human being. Everyone you meet treats you differently. Your old friends are now your subjects, their laughter a little too loud, their deference a little too deep. The most powerful senators in Rome, men who have commanded armies and governed provinces, now bow before you. They hang on your every word. No one ever disagrees with you to your face. Every joke you tell is hilarious. Every idea you have is brilliant. Your entire world transforms into a hall of mirrors where every surface reflects a distorted, aggrandized version of yourself. After a while, how could you not start to believe it? Then there's the loneliness. It is absolute and profound. Who can you trust? Every person who approaches you wants something: a promotion, a favor, a pardon. Is that senator your friend, or is he just flattering you to get a better governorship? Does your wife love you? Or does she love the power you represent? You are surrounded by people, but you are utterly alone with your thoughts and your fears. This isolation breeds paranoia. You start to see plots and conspiracies everywhere. That group of senators whispering in the corner, are they talking about the grain supply? Or are they plotting your assassination? A stray comment, an offhand joke, a moment of insufficient enthusiasm, anything can be interpreted as a sign of treason is death. And in your world, the penalty for treason is death. This constant, gnawing suspicion would be enough to erode anyone's sanity. Let's not forget the religious dimension. You are not just a political leader, you are the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest of Rome. You are the link between the mortal and divine worlds. And very quickly, you are expected to become a god yourself. Temples are built in your honor. People offer sacrifices to your genius, your divine spirit. When you travel through the eastern provinces, people prostrate themselves before you as they would before a living deity. It might seem like a useful political tool. But what happens when you start to believe it? What happens when the line between playing the part of a god and actually thinking you are one begins to blur, and eventually, the costume becomes the skin? This is where Caligula's bizarre conversations with the statue of Jupiter come from. It's the logical, if insane, endpoint of a job that demands you see yourself as more than human. Here's a strange little detail that encapsulates the psychological pressure cooker of the palace. The very food you ate was a source of terror. Poisoning was a constant threat, an occupational hazard for a Roman emperor. You couldn't just enjoy a meal. Every dish had to be prepared by trusted servants and often tasted by a food taster before it reached your lips. But who could you trust? Your food taster could be bribed. Your cook could be blackmailed. Your own wife, as Claudius discovered, might be the one slipping something onto your plate. Every meal becomes a potential attempt on your life. The simple, universal human pleasure of sharing food is transformed into a ritual of suspicion and fear. This constant, low-level terror, day in and day out, would have a corrosive effect on anyone's psyche. This leads us to the great, unresolved debate about the mad emperors. Were they sociopaths who were drawn to power, or did the power itself make them into sociopaths? Was the problem nature or nurture? Historians are divided. Some argue that men like Caligula and Nero showed signs of instability and cruelty long before you took the throne. You both grew up in the toxic, murderous environment of the Julio-Claudian court. You saw family members exiled and killed. You learned from a young age that power was a brutal, zero-sum game. The argument here is that the system selected for and promoted deeply damaged individuals. The ones who survived to take the throne were the ones who had already learned to be ruthless, paranoid, and devoid of empathy. The other school of thought argues that the office itself is the corrupting force. It could take a relatively normal, decent person and twist them into a monster. The constant adulation, the lack of any real checks on your behavior, the absolute power of life and death over millions. This is a weight that the human psyche is simply not designed to bear. It's like subjecting a person to a constant, high dose of a powerful, reality-distorting drug. Eventually, it will break them. It's a terrifying combination of the two. The job attracted damaged people, and then the job proceeded to damage them even further. It was a perfect storm of pre-existing trauma and situational psychosis. You are not just a bad man, you are a case study in what happens when the fragile human mind is given the power of a god. The absolute power didn't just corrupt, it drove you mad. So you've seen the whole sordid story play out. The Julio-Claudian dynasty, a family drama of epic proportions, finally collapses under the weight of its own dysfunction, culminating in the chaos of the Year of the Four Emperors. The Roman world has been pushed to the brink. But it doesn't fall apart. The pragmatic soldier Vespasian and his sons, Titus and Domitian, managed to restore order. They form the Flavian dynasty, a brief but effective period of reconstruction. They clean up the financial mess you left, they begin building the Colosseum on the site of your Golden Houses Lake, and they restore a sense of stability. But the fundamental problem remains: how do you ensure a good succession? How do you avoid another Caligula or another Nero? Vespasian and his sons revert to the simplest model: direct, hereditary succession. Power passes from father to son. This works for a time. Vespasian is a capable ruler, and his son Titus is so beloved that he's known as the delight of mankind. But then Titus dies after only 2 years, and the throne passes to his younger brother Domitian. And with Domitian, the old problems start to reappear. He is autocratic, paranoid, and demands to be addressed as Dominus et Deus, Lord and God. He unleashes a new reign of terror against the Senate, and he is eventually assassinated in a palace conspiracy, much like Caligula was. The Flavian dynasty ends in the same way the Julio-Claudian one did, with a tyrant and an assassin's dagger. The problem of succession has not been solved. Bloodline, it seems, is not the answer. It's a genetic lottery, and Rome has lost twice. After Domitian's assassination, the Senate, for once, acts quickly. They choose one of their own, a mild-mannered, elderly, and childless senator named Nerva, to be the new emperor. It's a stopgap measure. Nerva is old and has no heir, which means he is not a threat to start a new dynasty. But he is also weak, and the Praetorian Guard, who were loyal to Domitian, quickly push him around. Nerva realizes that he needs the support of the army to survive. He comes up with a new solution to the succession problem, a solution that will usher in the most peaceful and prosperous period in Roman history. He decides to adopt a son, but he doesn't choose a family member. He chooses the most qualified man for the job. He formally adopts Marcus Sulpius Trajanus Trajan, the respected and powerful general in command of the legions on the German frontier. With this single act, Nerva secures the loyalty of the army and establishes a revolutionary new principle. The emperor should not be the man's biological son, but the best man available, chosen for his merit, experience, and ability. This is the birth of the system of adoptive emperors. You are no longer gambling on the genetic lottery of a troubled bloodline. You are, in essence, creating a merit-based system for the highest office in the world. This system is the antidote to the poison that afflicted your family. It is what ushers in the era of the five good emperors Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, and Marcus Aurelius. For the better part of a century, the Roman Empire is ruled by a succession of capable, sane, and dedicated administrators. Trajan expands the empire to its greatest extent. Hadrian, a restless intellectual and traveler, consolidates the frontiers, building his famous wall in Britain. Antoninus Pius presides over a long, peaceful, and prosperous reign. And finally, Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king, spends his reign defending the empire from barbarian invasions while writing his Stoic masterpiece, the Meditations. Here's a small detail that illustrates the success of this new system. When Trajan was formally adopted by Nerva, he wasn't even in Italy. He was on the Rhine frontier with his troops. He didn't rush back to Rome to claim his new title. He stayed at his post for nearly a year, finishing the job of securing the border. This sent a powerful message: duty came first. He was an emperor who saw his role, not as a prize to be enjoyed, but as a burden to be shouldered. It was the complete opposite of your own self-indulgent style. Of course, historians still debate how good these good emperors really were. Their reigns were certainly good for the senatorial class, who were treated with respect, which is why the historians of that class wrote so glowingly about them. But it was still an absolute monarchy, and their reigns were not without war and persecution. The system also had a hidden flaw. Its success depended entirely on each emperor having the wisdom and selflessness to choose a worthy successor over his own family, for successive transfers of power, it worked perfectly. But then came Marcus Aurelius. He was, by all accounts, one of the wisest and most virtuous men to ever hold power. And yet he made one fateful, disastrous decision. He had a biological son, Commodus, and instead of choosing a best man to succeed him, Marcus Aurelius broke the chain and allowed his own to inherit the throne. With the accession of Commodus, the age of the good emperors comes to a screeching halt. Commodus is a throwback to the worst of your era. He fancies himself a great gladiator, fighting in the arena. He is paranoid, cruel, and completely uninterested in the business of governing. His reign is a disaster, and he is eventually strangled in his bath by a wrestler. His death plunges the empire back into a vicious civil war, even worse than the one that followed your own death. The brilliant system of adoption had an expiration date. It was only as strong as the virtue of the man making the choice, and in the end, the simple primal pull of paternal love proved stronger than political wisdom. The Roman world would pay a heavy price for Marcus Aurelius's one great mistake, proving that the problem of absolute power is never truly solved, just postponed. And so here you are at the end of our journey. The night has deepened around you. The sounds of your own world have likely faded into a soft, indistinct hum. You walked the marble corridors of the Palatine Hill. You stood in the shadow of the Colossus. You smelled the sea air at Baiae, and you've hidden in the dark, reedy ditches outside Rome. You've seen a republic transform into an empire, and you watched that empire place its fate in the hands of a single family. You've seen what absolute power combined with profound personal trauma can do to a human being. Let's take one last walk together, not through a specific moment in time, but through the ruins of the place where it all happened. Imagine you are on the Palatine Hill in Rome tonight, under the moonlight. This was the Beverly Hills of ancient Rome, the place where the rich and powerful built their homes. And after Augustus, it became the exclusive address of the emperors. The very word palace comes from this hill. From Polit-Yum, you can feel the ghosts here. Skeletal remains of arches and halls silhouetted against the soft glow of the modern city below. You can almost hear the echoes. Over there, perhaps, are the modest foundations of the house where Augustus lived his strangely frugal life, weaving the illusion of a restored republic. A little further on, you can trace the sprawling footprint of the Domus Tiberianae, the palace from which Tiberius ruled, before he fled to his island of sorrows. Somewhere beneath your feet, buried under layers of earth and history, is the crypto porticus, the subterranean corridor where Caligula fell, his divine pretensions silenced by a flurry of vengeful blades. You pass by the remnants of grand halls where Claudius, the scholar emperor, might have sat, poring over his histories, blissfully unaware of the chaos unfolding in his own household. And then there's the biggest ghost of all. The ruins of your own golden house are still here, though mostly buried. After your death, your successors deliberately built over it. But deep underground, archaeologists have excavated some of its rooms. You can even to the darkness and see the faint traces of the brilliant frescoes that once adorned your walls. You can stand in what might have been the octagonal dining hall and imagine the revolving ceiling turning slowly above you, a microcosm of a universe that revolved entirely around you. It is a haunting space, a buried monument to a dream that became a nightmare. The art is still beautiful, a testament to the incredible creativity of the age, but it's a beauty tainted by the memory of the cruelty and indulgence that funded it. A quirky final detail for you to ponder as you stand among these ruins. The term emperor itself is a funny thing. It comes from the Latin word imperator, which originally was a title given to a victorious general by his troops on the battlefield. It meant commander. It was a temporary military honor. Augustus adopted it as part of his name, a nod to his military authority. Over time, this military title morphed into the supreme political title, the name for the ruler of the entire Roman world. It's a perfect linguistic fossil. It reminds us that for all the talk of divinity, for all the marble temples and golden palaces, the ultimate source of your power was never the gods or the senate or the people. It was the army. The office of emperor was born from civil war, and its true nature was always military. The man who controlled the legions controlled the world. This was the simple, brutal truth that underpinned the entire imperial system. The historical debate that echoes loudest on this silent hill is the one we've been circling all night. Were these men monsters or victims? Were they calculating tyrants playing a game of power? Or were they mentally ill individuals broken by a system no human was meant to withstand? There is no single, easy answer. Tiberius was a gloomy recluse, but also a skilled administrator. Caligula was a cruel prankster who may have been suffering from a profound neurological disorder. Claudius was an underestimated intellectual controlled by his powerful wives. And you, Nero, were a talented artist with a deep narcissistic streak and a chilling capacity for violence. They were not one-dimensional villains. They were complex, deeply flawed human beings, placed in an impossible situation. As you look out over the modern city of Rome from the quiet darkness of the Palatine, you can see the enduring legacy of this era. The Colosseum, born from the ashes of your golden house. The grand arches and temples built by your successors. The very idea of an emperor, a single, all-powerful ruler, has haunted the Western imagination for 2 millennia. The story of your family is more than just a sequence of lurid events. It's a profound and enduring cautionary tale about the seductive, corrupting, and ultimately destructive nature of absolute power. The whispers on this hill are not just of the past. They are a timeless warning. The moon is higher now, casting long, soft shadows across the ancient stones. The echoes of history are fading, softening into a gentle murmur. The sharp edges of the stories, the glint of the dagger, the roar of the fire, the jeers of the crowd are all blurring now, losing their focus. You can feel the weight of sleep beginning to settle, a comforting blanket gently draping over your mind. The path you are on is no longer on the hard cobblestones of the Palatine Hill. It's a softer path now, winding through a quiet, silvery landscape that seems to exist just for you. The air is still and cool. You can let go of the names and the dates, let them drift away like dandelion seeds on a gentle breeze. Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, they're just sounds now, fading whispers in the vast silence of the past. They are no longer your concern. The weight of their crowns, the terrible burden of their power, you can feel it lifting from your own shoulders. It was never yours to carry. You were just a visitor, a silent observer drifting through their world for a little while. And now your visit is over. You can leave them to their ghosts, to their eternal arguments in the dust. Your own journey is taking you somewhere else now, somewhere peaceful and untroubled. The path ahead is smooth and easy, leading you deeper into the quiet country of your own dreams. Each step is lighter than the last. Each breath is slower, deeper. The story is over. Now there is only rest. The end of the article. Good night.